Chapter 471. Qin Wentian naturally understood this. In truth, after Di Tian stepped into the third level, he only experienced a single thought. But this thought actually caused him to feel as though many years had passed. It was like a dream, a life of its own. Such a method or innate technique was simply unimaginably powerful. I've once entered a dreamscape before. Dreamscape experts are able to create dreams, but what Di Tian experienced wasn't merely a dream created by others. He even knew that he had another body, and knew that Fairy Qingmei had her own consciousness. But even so, he still couldn't extricate himself from the dreamscape. Qin Wentian's expression turned solemn. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. The most difficult part of the ancient path was the fact that he had two bodies, yet he still couldn't wake up. One could very well imagine how terrifying this was. Di Tian could only depend on himself. No one could help him. This was a test of his will. If he couldn't wake up, there was a very high possibility that he would be trapped in that nightmare forever, consigned to eternal damnation. You are connected to his mind, yet he actually couldn't sense your existence? Qing'er asked in a low voice. Qin Wentian nodded. That's exactly why it's so terrifying. While he was in that dreamscape, his control over his will was so great that even the connection between us was suppressed. I wonder if it was a dreamscape or an illusory technique. Qing'er's eyelashes fluttered. After which, she stared at Qin Wentian. Her clear eyes caused Qin Wentian's eyes to flicker as he asked, "What's wrong? Does that have anything to do with you hugging me?" Qing'er asked, her words causing an awkward smile to appear on Qin Wentian's face. He still wanted to change the topic, yet he didn't expect Qing'er to be so astute. Staring at her pure and flawless eyes, Qin Wentian could only bitterly smile. In Di Tian's dreamscape, something that made me extremely afraid happened, so... Oh! Qing'er interrupted Qin Wentian's words. She directly turned away, causing Qin Wentian to be unable to see the changes in her expression. However, Qing'er didn't seem to be angry. Gazing at the bamboo forest, Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath. When he thought of the pain Di Tian had experienced, he silently swore in his heart, "I will never allow such a life to happen." As he thought of this, Qin Wentian clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, he suddenly didn't want to clash head-on with the Pill Emperor Hall. He could disregard himself, but he had to consider his family and friends. He didn't wish for anything to happen to any of them. "Let me bear all of this," Qin Wentian silently mused. Although Junyu's strength wasn't very strong, Fairy Qingmei had told him about the Royal Sacred Sect and the Three Empires before. If things were really like what happened in the dreamscape, Junyu was able to summon external forces. Even if he had the immortal vanquishing swordplay, wouldn't that mean that he would be slaughtered the moment he slashed out? Even if he killed Junyu, he might feel a momentary sense of satisfaction. But what about the subsequent rage? He definitely had to take revenge for Qingcheng, but he wouldn't allow anything to happen to the people around him. "Qing'er, I plan to cultivate for a period of time before I leave Grand Xia," Qin Wentian spoke. The dream he had with Di Tian caused him to change his mind. He wanted to go out. He wanted to become even stronger, possessing strength that no one in Grand Xia could contend against. At that time, only then would he have the qualifications to protect everyone. "Oh," Qing'er replied. She didn't seem to have much of a reaction. However, Qin Wentian was already used to this. "I will go as well." Qing'er spoke again, her words causing a smile to appear on Qin Wentian's face. Although Qing'er wasn't a talkative person, Qin Wentian had long treated her as one of the people closest to him. Every time he encountered life-threatening danger, she would always appear before him, never missing. He still remembered when he transformed into a great rock. Only Qing'er accompanied him silently. She told him, "I won't allow you to become a demon." For the sake of this simple sentence, Qin Wentian didn't know what price she had to pay to obtain the great Nirvana immortal art. He had asked Qing'er a few times but she wouldn't reply. However, Qin Wentian himself had never given up on it. The great Nirvana immortal art was a heaven-defying secret art. How could it be so easy to obtain it? Creating two identical bodies with the same level of talent. If it was obtained by an extremely powerful character, he would be able to create two supreme experts. If this secret art was made known to others, Grand Xia would definitely go crazy over it. Let alone Junyu. Even the powerful royal sacred sect would tremble in fear. Qing'er had instructed him not to reveal this secret art. Hence, even if it was to Fan Lu and the others, Qin Wentian didn't reveal this secret art. Qin Wentian went back to his cultivation. Di Tian's body had gained many insights and he could directly absorb them. However, he needed some time to stabilize the foundation of this body. As for Di Tian's body, he wasn't as relaxed as Qin Wentian. Right now, he was still struggling in the endless pain of the devil barrier. Amidst the devil barrier, Qin Wentian was still madly sprinting through the demonic beast forest in Chu. Dead, all of them had died. Qing'er had given him the last hope of survival, yet she herself had died. That final smile of hers, he would never be able to forget it. It resounded in his mind, causing him to feel a piercing pain in his heart. He didn't dare to face it, he didn't dare to imagine that scene. He hated himself. Why did things turn out like this? Qin Wentian roared to the heavens. It was unknown how long he had been running, but he eventually fainted in the forest. When he woke up, he was in a daze. His hair was in a mess, and he resembled a madman. He basically couldn't feel that this was an illusion. It was too real. It was like a lifetime, a cycle of reincarnation. He had no way to extricate himself from it. He couldn't even sense anything. Would a person who had experienced his entire life doubt that this life was fake? Clearly, it was impossible. Self-blame and remorse lingered in his heart. Qin Wentian continued sprinting, and after an unknown period of time, he arrived at a village in Chu. The people in the village only knew the simplest of cultivation methods. In fact, they weren't even stellar martial cultivators, but ordinary cultivators who absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth. Their strength was at the lowest level, yet they lived in peace and tranquility. He couldn't help but feel a little envious of the lives of the villagers. If he, Qing'er and the others could also live in such a village, living a carefree life, how wonderful would that be? Carefree, standing aloof from worldly affairs. Qin Wentian felt that he was extremely fatigued. He wanted to rest. In the village, he met a young girl. With just a single glance, Qin Wentian was deeply attracted to her. This young girl actually resembled Mo Qingqing in the past. Pure and flawless, beautiful and moving. She was like the most beautiful flower in this world, radiating the light of the sun. When this young girl saw that he was injured, she decided to take care of him. Very quickly, the two of them got to know each other. Qin Wentian was infatuated with the life in the village, no longer willing to venture out. It was as though he was fleeing from something. He was afraid that he would recall those nightmares. Every time he thought of them, his heart would feel as though it was being sliced by knives, as though countless arrows were piercing through his heart. He gradually chose to forget everything in the past. In that case, he wouldn't have to face them again. Gradually, he had a new life. He became an ordinary person, living a peaceful and tranquil life. It was as though he was willing to live like this forever. However, all this happiness was shattered. Junyu's men found the village, and it just so happened that he wasn't there. He stood on a mountain peak far away and personally witnessed the destruction of the village. He saw the arrival of celestial phenomenon ascendants, and he hated himself for being powerless. He hated himself. He wanted to flee again, to leave this place. No. Qin Wentian let out a hysterical howl. He inclined his head and stared at the sky as his gaze abruptly turned incomparably sharp. Qing'er won't die. Father and sister Qin Yao won't die as well. Everything is fake, all fake. Qin Wentian howled madly. He wanted to question his life. He could sense that there was a mysterious force that was driving him crazy, forcing him into a state of eternal damnation. I won't flee anymore. Qin Wentian sat on the mountain peak as his gaze turned incomparably resolute. If this is a real life, I'm willing to bury it with my own hands. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wentian willed as a sharp sword appeared in front of him. Qin Wentian gripped the sharp sword in his hand, and with no hesitation he directly pierced it into his own chest. Instantly, a heart-wrenching pain assaulted his senses. Qin Wentian lowered his head, staring at the fresh blood flowing out. How could this be fake? This was his life. How could it be fake? If this life is real, I, Qin Wentian, am so cowardly and weak. What face do I have to continue living in this world? Qin Wentian calmly laughed, as though he was enlightened. He no longer cared about life and death. I want a new life, a different life. Even if I have to be sliced into 1,000 pieces, I will still end this life, regardless of whether it's real or fake. As the sound of his voice faded, his sword pierced into his heart. Such pain almost caused him to fall unconscious. However, the smile on Qin Wentian's face still remained. He roared. Do you still want to stop me from ending this sinful life? Who are you exactly? How can you be so strong that you can trap me in this life forever? As he spoke, numerous sharp swords appeared in the air. Qin Wentian closed his eyes and roared in anger. In an instant, countless sharp swords flew towards him and pierced into his body. Millions of swords pierced through his heart, but he didn't regret it. This was his obsession. He wanted to end this sinful life. How could he, Qin Wentian, live such a lowly and cowardly life? If this life was real, then he would die. Millions of swords pierced through his body. Qin Wentian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, everything seemed to have disappeared in an instant. Everything returned to tranquility. In the vast space, a silhouette quietly laid there. This silhouette was none other than Qin Wentian. His eyelashes moved as he opened his eyes. His eyes were still filled with determination and persistence. That unbearable life, even if it's just a dream, I will still end it. Qin Wentian murmured as he sat up. As expected, it was all in vain. Is this the test of the third level? Qin Wentian felt a sense of loss in his heart. He actually didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. This life was so unforgettable that it made his heart ache. Although he knew that it was fake, he still couldn't let go of it. It was too real. It was so real that it felt like he was experiencing another life. It was so real that even if a sword pierced into his heart, he still couldn't extricate himself. This was the most difficult test. The first test, combat strength, was the easiest. The second test, comprehension, was extremely difficult. The sword force could kill. The third test, willpower, faith, life. This test was too terrifying. It was so terrifying that even the current Qin Wentian felt his hair standing on end. Luckily, everything had ended. Chapter 472. Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath. It was as though he wanted to completely forget everything that happened in the dreamscape. His eyes gleamed with sharpness, as a terrifying determination could be seen within. After experiencing such a calamity in the dreamscape, he was able to awaken with his absolute will and conviction. This caused his state of heart to grow even more resolute. Nobody would be able to obstruct his path forward. Standing up, Qin Wentian only felt a chill permeating his entire body. Perspiration drenched his robes, and when the gentle breeze brushed past, the coldness seeped into his skin, causing him to feel traces of coldness. However, his gaze was still fixated ahead. In the distance ahead, there was a true ancient emperor's tomb. However, it radiated a resplendent light, as though this ancient tomb would never lose its brilliance. His silhouette flickered. Qin Wentian walked to the boundary of this space and stared at the golden-colored ancient tomb ahead of him. In this entire space, there was only a single ancient tomb that existed. The tombstone of this ancient tomb was actually in the shape of a human. Clearly, it was a statue of an ancient emperor. This tomb was the tomb of an ancient emperor. There are words here. Qin Wentian stared at the statue, only to see that in front of the chest area of the statue, there was actually an ancient tombstone inscribed with words. Tomb of the Xia Emperor. Qin Wentian stared at the 3 words on the right as his heart pounded. The owner of this tomb was none other than the Xia Emperor. Grand Xia, after so many generations, had produced many emperors. Regardless of the tyrant emperor or the blood emperor, both of them could be considered as the overlords of Grand Xia. However, there was only one person who was truly named the Xia Emperor. The ancestor of Grand Xia, the Xia Emperor. This place, the tomb of the Xia Emperor. In front of the statue of the Xia Emperor, a golden-colored pathway could be seen. This pathway was extremely long, and on the left and right, there were numerous puppets standing there motionlessly. These puppets all wielded long spears in their hands, and although they stood there motionlessly, A powerful killing intent emanated from them. What caused Qin Wentian to be taken aback was that at the start of the golden pathway, there was actually a seat for a cultivator to sit on. On top of the seat, there were many ancient scrolls. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he soared through the air, stopping at the starting point of the golden pathway. He sat on the ground and took out one of the ancient scrolls. This ancient scroll actually contained information regarding the Tao of divine inscriptions, causing Qin Wentian to be extremely astonished. In front of the tomb of the Xia clan's founder, the Xia Emperor, the first page was an ancient scroll of divine inscriptions. This scroll was somewhat similar to the gold element ancient scroll that Qin Wentian had obtained. However, this scroll was much more profound, containing the Tao of divine inscriptions puppetry, the Tao of divine inscriptions formations, and the Tao of divine inscriptions forging. Could it be that the founder of the Xia clan, the Xia Emperor, was an expert proficient in the Tao of divine inscriptions? Qin Wentian flipped through the pages one by one, and finally, he came across a page that recorded a formation. This formation was named the Ancient Vermilion Bird Formation. Vermilion Bird Formation. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. It was actually the Vermilion Bird Formation, the formation that they entered during the Heavenly Fate Rankings battle. This battle was a peak-tier 5th-ranked Divine Inscriptions formation, and was extremely mysterious. Qin Wentian only felt that it was boundlessly wondrous. Such a grand formation wasn't something he could comprehend in the past. Even when he stood within the formation, he couldn't see through its intricacies at all. Now that he personally witnessed the inscription method of this formation, he was even more shocked. Back then, the might of the Vermilion Bird Formation wasn't even at the peak of the 5th ranked. It seemed like the exhaustion of Grand Xia over the years had caused the Vermilion Bird Formation to lose its former glory. Qin Wentian placed the ancient scroll down and turned his attention to the second scroll. This scroll contained a cultivation art, the Great Dream Immortal Art. Before this, the cultivation art Qin Wentian used was the Dreamcast art. This was a cultivation art at the Heavenly Dipper realm, allowing one to cultivate in their dreams, absorbing astral energy from the astral light. But now, with the appearance of the Great Dream Immortal Art, it seemed that it could perfectly replace the Dreamcast art. When Qin Wentian flipped through the pages of the Great Dream Immortal Art, he was instantly struck by a deep sense of awe. He was completely immersed within, unable to extricate himself. Before this, he had already deeply felt how terrifying the might of the Great Dream Immortal Art was. The Xia Emperor who had died many years ago created a dream for him, causing him to almost be unable to extricate himself. What was even more terrifying was that the snowman and sword forest from before were all created by him. However, the snowman and sword forest were different from the third dimension. He had truly experienced them, hence he was able to successfully cultivate the 7 Annihilations swordplay. But in the third dimension he was trapped within a dream. However, the power of the Great Dream Immortal Art was so great that people couldn't differentiate between reality and reality. Or to put it in another way, dreams could be passed off as reality. After a long time, Qin Wentian finally retracted his will, placing the Great Dream Immortal Art back in its original location. This Great Dream Immortal Art, other than the power of the dreamscape, had another advantage. For those who cultivated it, they would be able to create innate techniques more easily, perfecting them in their dreams. After all, as stellar martial cultivators grew stronger, their mandates, astral novas, and martial constellations would all gradually be able to unleash immense power. And powerful innate techniques all had to be fused together. If one could create an innate technique, they would naturally be able to fuse the energy they were most proficient in into the innate technique, allowing the power unleashed to be even stronger. Qin Wentian picked up the ancient scroll on the right and opened it. This wasn't a cultivation art, nor was it an innate technique. Instead, it was a map. On this map, there were mountain ranges all around, and immortal qi permeated the air. However, amidst the immortal qi, there seemed to be an immortal palace floating in the air. And above this immortal palace, the silhouette of a vermilion bird could be seen flickering in and out of existence. In all directions of the mountain range where this immortal palace was located, there were many other maps. Evidently, This map wanted to tell him the location of the immortal palace in the center. The totem of Grand Xia is the vermilion bird. Could it be related to this? Qin Wentian silently mused. If not, why would the Xia Emperor leave behind a map of the immortal palace here? Standing up, Qin Wentian stared at the golden ancient pathway, after which he stepped out. Instantly, an incomparably intense killing intent permeated the air. However, as Qin Wentian's foot landed, the resplendent runes on the pathway abruptly dimmed. Every step he took caused the golden pathway to tremble, as the runes on the pathway were suppressed by the runes on the pathway. At this moment, in the center of Qin Wentian's brows, his third eye shone resplendently. He naturally knew that this golden pathway was actually a pathway of divine inscriptions. Those who stepped on it would die without a doubt. The Xia Emperor left behind an ancient scroll of divine inscriptions at the starting point. Most probably, it was because he hoped that those who came here would be able to comprehend the Tao of divine inscriptions. But to Qin Wentian, with his incomparably strong perception of divine inscriptions, breaking the formation of divine inscriptions was much easier than inscribing it. With each step he took, he stepped onto the lifeline of the divine inscriptions. Stellar transposition. Crackling sounds rang out as the puppets on both sides of the golden pathway began to move. With a flicker of their silhouettes, the long spears in their hands stabbed towards Qin Wentian, exuding a fearsome killing intent. Stellar transposition. Qin Wentian stepped on astral light as he landed beside the puppet. His palms continuously slammed onto the surface of the puppet, causing it to instantly collapse onto the ground. It was as though the divine inscriptions inscribed within had been destroyed. Qin Wentian had long since researched the reverse divine inscriptions. Now that his cultivation base was also at the heavenly dipper realm, fourth-ranked puppets, even if they were of higher quality, wouldn't be able to pose a threat to him. In the blink of an eye, numerous puppets were destroyed by him. Qin Wentian continued on the golden pathway. Even if the Xia Emperor was reincarnated, he wouldn't have imagined that he would arrive in front of the statue so quickly. Qin Wentian stared at the ancient words inscribed on the statue of the Xia Emperor. If you arrive here, take the key in my hand. Shifting his gaze, Qin Wentian stared at the palm of the Xia Emperor. Indeed, there was a key in the palm of the Xia Emperor. Qin Wentian stretched his hand out and took the key. Instantly, a golden beam of light flashed as the heavens and earth vanished. Qin Wentian's silhouette appeared in another dimension. Here, the mountains were surrounded by celestial qi. The silhouette of Emperor Xia stood in the air. Behind him was the celestial palace depicted on the map. However, at this moment, the physical celestial palace was even more shocking. If you come here, it means that Grand Xia is already on the verge of destruction. Or maybe you have extraordinary talent, being able to light up all 81 stone pillars. Naturally, there's also the possibility of both. No matter what the situation is, regardless of whether you are a descendant of my Xia clan or not, I hope that you will be able to protect Grand Xia from destruction. The Xia Emperor slowly spoke. Qin Wentian knew that this wasn't the real Xia Emperor. This must be a dream left behind by the Xia Emperor when he was still alive, bringing him here. I'm the Xia Emperor. Back then, I came to the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace by chance and obtained the Great Dream Immortal Art, a powerful formation as well as many supreme cultivation treasures. This good fortune allowed me to unify Grand Xia and establish a dynasty. It's just that during this process, many treasures and resources were lost during my conquest. Only the Great Dream Immortal Art and the Great Dream Immortal Art remained with me. However, these aren't the most valuable treasures. The key I left behind can open the gate to the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. This key is something that even the hegemon of this region, the Royal Sacred Sect, yearns for even in their dreams. However, I've entered the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace before, and I know very well that powerful combat prowess, transcendent comprehension abilities, and an incomparably resolute heart are all indispensable. If not, you would definitely end up with nothing. Hence, before you came here, you had to undergo the most difficult trial. Only then would you have a chance. Back then when I entered the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace, the treasures I obtained were merely a hair from 9 oxen. There were simply too many formations and boundless divine inscriptions. Hence, I left behind the great dream immortal art for you to comprehend. Because even if you managed to find the vermilion bird immortal palace, the treasures you obtained would probably be inferior to mine. Hence, you might as well just take the great dream immortal art. However, congratulations, you have succeeded. The Xia Emperor smiled as he spoke. Even before his death, his heart was still filled with kindness. I hope that you, the one who came here, would be more outstanding than me. Only then would my efforts not be wasted. As the sound of his voice faded, his silhouette gradually turned illusory. However, that smile on his face was still there. The rise and fall of fate. Those of the future, you are the one who saw the last strand of my great dream immortal will. After this strand of will, the Xia Emperor no longer exists in this world. As the sound of his voice faded, the silhouette of the Xia Emperor gradually vanished. The last strand of his great dream immortal will completely vanish from this world. Chapter 473. Qin Wentian's Ditian's silhouette dissipated together with the dream. He was still standing on the golden pathway, in front of the statue of the Xia Emperor. Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. He glanced at the key in his hand, finally understanding why the Grand Xia Empire would use the vermilion bird as their totem. So it turned out that back then, the Xia Emperor had coincidentally entered the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace and obtained immense benefits. After which, he officially conquered the region of chaos and established the Grand Xia Empire. Retreating slightly, Qin Wentian bowed thrice to the statue of the Xia Emperor as he spoke in a low voice. Junior isn't a descendant of Grand Xia. Today, I was fortunate enough to see Senior's final wish. I will definitely engrave it in my heart. After the unification of Grand Xia, the name of the Xia Empire will not change. It will continue to be the Grand Xia Empire for all eternity. After speaking, he bowed once more and kept the key to the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. He then returned to the starting point of the pathway and prepared to comprehend the ancient scrolls. His attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions weren't bad, and his talent was also good. It was just that because of his cultivation, his attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions had been neglected. Now that he was in front of the Xia Emperor's tombstone, he could carefully comprehend the inscriptions and strive to use his own strength to inscribe the 5th-ranked Vermilion Bird Grand Formation as soon as possible. Only then would the Grand Xia Empire regain its former glory. At the same time, his state of heart had undergone a transformation as well. It was time for him to break through. Far away in the bamboo forest outside the spirit continent, Qin Wentian's original body naturally learned of the happenings here. He was extremely shocked as he chatted with Qing Er. Qing Er, who was beside him, stared at him as she asked in a melodious voice. And then, Qin Wentian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Qing Er, help me contact your master. During these few days, I'm preparing to stabilize the foundation of this body and see if there's a chance for me to break through. After that, I'll make all the necessary arrangements before setting off. Oh. Qing Er nodded her head lightly. After which, Qin Wentian stepped into the bamboo forest. Qin Wentian's original body and Ditian's heart and soul were connected. He could feel the changes in Ditian's state of heart. If Ditian could break through, so could he. All he needed was Yuan meteor stones. The bamboo forest was quiet and peaceful with a gentle breeze. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. On this day, the quiet bamboo forest was filled with resplendent starlight. A surging will was released, and all sorts of lights enveloped the entire bamboo forest. Fairy Qing Mei and the leader of the mystic moon sect stood together. The two of them stared into the depths of the bamboo forest as a strange light flickered in their eyes. He broke through. In that case, Qin Wentian's cultivation base had already stepped into the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. Based on this terrifying rate of improvement, there was a high chance that Qin Wentian would step into the upper 3 levels of Heavenly Dipper by the time he was 30. Currently, Qin Wentian was only 25 years old. At this moment, Qin Wentian walked out from the bamboo forest. He had a smile on his face, exuding an extraordinary aura. From top to bottom, there wasn't the slightest bit of aura leaking out. It was as though he had already returned to his original state, giving off a mysterious feeling. If one were to glance at him, They wouldn't even dare to imagine that such a young man would actually have a cultivation base at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. Uncle Zong, Elder Bailu, Aunt Bing, Old Xing, all of you can come over. Qin Wentian spoke. A moment later, a group of people walked over. All of them had smiles on their faces. Zongyi then continued. Wentian, I didn't expect you to step into the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper so quickly. I'm afraid that in less than 10 years, even if you don't transform into a great rock, you would still be able to stand at the peak of Grand Xia. Given Wentian's talent, he definitely has a chance. The original sect leader of the Ice Spirit sect, Bing Yuchan, smiled as she nodded her head. Even the punishment old man nodded in agreement, expressing his agreement with Zong Yi's words. All the elders should already know my thoughts, right? Qin Wentian shook his head and smiled as he spoke. Wentian, do you really intend to leave? The original clan leader of the White Deer Institute asked. It's hard for me to display my prowess in Grand Xia. It's about time for me to go out and take a look. Right now, Tian is in closed-door seclusion in the ancient kingdom. He would definitely have a fortuitous encounter. When he comes out in the future, he would naturally be in control of the situation here. In addition, with the support of Senior Qing Mei and the other elders from the Mystic Moon sect, what's there for me to be worried about? Qin Wentian stared at everyone as he slowly spoke. Right now, the name of my sect will be changed back to the Azure Emperor Palace. I'm temporarily the Palace Lord, and when I'm not around, Tian will be like me. Senior Qing Mei will be the Vice Palace Lord and Old Man Xing will be in charge of the Punishment Hall. You all have to choose suitable candidates from the various factions to join the Punishment Hall. All of you will be the doyens and elders of your respective factions. All of you have to seriously choose those with outstanding character and talent, imparting them the ultimate arts of Grand Xia that are suitable for them to cultivate. The Punishment Hall will be the one to supervise the Azure Emperor Palace. The resources of the Azure Emperor Palace will be managed by my Master Mustang and Senior Sister Luo Huan. The resources from the Sky Thunder country must be fully coordinated. However, all of you still have to be cautious in your actions. Don't reveal your identities when you are out tempering. At the same time, the disciples of the various factions are not allowed to know the locations of the other factions. Only those present here will know. Understood. Everyone nodded their heads. The leaders of the various factions would still be in charge of the disciples of the various factions. This was for the sake of ease of control, and to prevent chaos. The Azure Emperor Palace had just been established and wasn't suitable for chaos. Also, although the various factions were under the control of the Azure Emperor Palace, they would still operate independently and be managed by the upper echelons of the Azure Emperor Palace. Even when you want to leave, you won't let your senior sister off. Luo Huan rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian laughed. Senior sister, you are talented and intelligent. I can be at ease if you are in charge of the resources. How can the resources you left behind be sufficient for the various factions? Luckily, we still have the treasure vault of the Sky Thunder country. Luo Huan's lips twitched. That would depend on senior sister's capabilities. The various factions all have their own capabilities, and it wouldn't be difficult for them to plunder resources. Let's do things in the dark and develop stealthily. Given how vast Grand Xia is, who would know about it? Let's wait for the day I return and give Grand Xia a pleasant surprise. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. You brat. You should go out and enjoy yourself while dragging your senior sister here to work for you. Luo Huan rebuked, her words causing Qin Wentian to bitterly smile as he shook his head. Senior sister, Grand Xia is no longer a place that I can control with my current strength. Not only that, how vast is the outside world? Senior sister, you have to constantly grow stronger and stronger. How would I dare to let senior sister suffer with me? In the future, when my strength grows stronger, I will definitely accompany senior sister to roam the outside world. Enough, you two siblings should stop flirting. Luo Huan Wentian is wrong. His talent is outstanding and Grand Xia is already a hindrance to his future. He has to leave this place. Don't make a fuss. Mustang joked, causing Luo Huan to turn to Mustang. Master is always biased towards him. When do you plan to leave? Fairy Qingmei stared at Qin Wentian. There's no time like the present. If one day Fan Lu, Ouyang Qing and the rest return, tell them that I'm heading to Grandshang. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice, his words causing the gazes of the crowd to freeze. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect asked, Junyu's status in Grandshang is extraordinary. Why did he choose Grandshang? If I want to head to the territory of the Royal Sacred Sect, I have to cross the entire Grandshang Empire. Not only that, although Junyu is a disciple of an elder of the Royal Sacred Sect, he is merely a disciple. How can he influence the entire Grandshang Empire? Qin Wentian shook his head and laughed. Not only that, I can transform into an incarnation at will. That's true. The leader of the Mystic Moon sect nodded her head lightly. Given Qin Wentian's trump cards, it wouldn't be easy for ordinary people to touch him. Although a year had passed since then, the memory of the great Solarchen clan was still fresh in her mind. All right everyone, let's meet again in the future. A bright light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes. His silhouette flickered as he floated in the air. Beside him, Little Rascal also floated in the air. Qing stepped out as she appeared behind Qin Wentian. Evidently, she was going to accompany Qin Wentian, a fellow who values his lover over his friends. Luo Huan's lips twitched as she giggled. Everyone, the Azure Emperor Palace shall be handed over to you all. Qin Wentian spoke in a heroic manner. With a wave of his hand he soared into the air. The crowd stared at the white-clad figure as they sighed in their hearts. This young man had left for Grandshang. Who knew what kind of storm would be stirred up in the outside world? When I return to Grand Xia in the future, I wonder how beautiful the scenery would be. Zhongyi stared at the departing figure of Qin Wentian as he sighed in his heart. He had heeded Qin Wentian's summons and joined the Azure Emperor Palace, destroying the 9 Mystical Palace and the Great Solarchen clan. He had also deeply felt how terrifying the waves of wind and waves a supreme demon-level genius could stir up. Zhongyi was truly filled with anticipation for the day when Qin Wentian returned to Grand Xia. That day would arrive sooner or later. The demon sword in the Pill Emperor Hall was still waiting for him to pluck it out for revenge. However, Zhongyi didn't know that right now, there was another Qin Wentian in the royal tomb of Grand Xia. Right now, the Pill Emperor Hall was on the verge of a revival. Junyu's return had reorganized the Pill Emperor Hall, causing their rallying power to soar to the heavens. Many talented geniuses were willing to join them, hoping for a chance at glory, allowing the Pill Emperor Hall to regain its vitality. Today more experts arrived at the Pill Emperor Hall. These experts all had a cultivation base at the Celestial Phenomenon Realm, their strength towering up the heavens, causing another wave of commotion in Grand Xia. They sent out a message to the entire Grand Xia. All the outstanding young geniuses could head to Grandshang to temper themselves. For those with the Sacred Royal Medallion, they could temporarily join the Grandshang Empire. In the future, for those with outstanding performance, the Grandshang Empire would heavily nurture them until they could join the Royal Sacred Sect. At the same time, the Grandshang Empire could also recommend geniuses to join other transcendent powers. These transcendent powers were all stronger compared to the transcendent powers of Grand Xia. As this news circulated out, one could very well imagine how great of a commotion it caused in Grand Xia. The demon-level geniuses of the various powers all prepared to head to Grandshang Empire. As for those from the 7 grand clans, those with the Sacred Royal Medallion also prepared to set off. In the Hua clan, the experts gathered together. They stared at the 3 silhouettes in front of them, as an intense yearning could be seen in their eyes. This was especially so for one of them, Hua Taishu. He was the most outstanding genius in the current generation of the Hua clan. The expectations the Hua clan had for him surpassed everyone else. Let's move out. Be more careful when you are outside. The Hua clan lord faintly spoke. After which, the 3 of them nodded their heads as their silhouettes flickered, soaring through the air. The eyes of those from the Hua clan were filled with anticipation as they stared at the departing backs of the 3. At the same time, in the Shi clan, Wang clan and the other transcendent powers, the same scene was happening as well. The demon-level geniuses all soared through the air, heading towards Grandshang. Which of these people would be able to stir up a storm in Grandshang? Chapter 474. In the Grand Xia Empire, the various transcendent powers all sent their demon-level geniuses out to temper themselves. Junyu, after failing to find Qin Wentian and the others, left Grand Xia with unhappiness in his heart. For a period of time, the vast Grand Xia Empire seemed to have regained a trace of peace. However, the undercurrents were still surging unceasingly. It was destined that things wouldn't be as peaceful as before. The various transcendent powers of Grand Xia were all working hard, wanting to stand tall in the face of the storm. This also determined the future of Grand Xia, plundering resources, swallowing up sects, and incessant wars. The Grand Shang Empire had an even longer history compared to the Grand Xia Empire. Once, many of the territories of Grand Xia were under the control of the Grand Shang Empire. It was only after the Xia Emperor conquered Grand Xia that the Grand Shang Empire was able to stand on equal footing with the Grand Shang Empire. However, the territory of the Grand Shang Empire was still much vaster than the Grand Xia Empire. And the difference between Grand Shang and Grand Xia was that other than having many terrifying transcendent powers, there was also the royal clan. The royal clan of Grand Shang was one of the most powerful transcendent powers in Grand Xia. South Central region of Grand Shang Empire, Luo City. White clouds enveloped the land. The weather was cool and refreshing. In the air, there were many people soaring through the air, or riding on flying demonic beasts. At this moment, below the clouds, in a certain location, a young man and woman could be seen. Their appearances were exceptionally outstanding. The young man was incomparably demonic. His eyes shone like the stars in the night sky. In his hands, there was an old and tattered wine gourd that he would occasionally take a sip from. As for the young woman, she was like a snow lotus on a mountain of ice, so beautiful that it caused people to be breathless. However, the aura she exuded was so cold that no one dared to get close to her. She simply stood there, like a beautiful statue. Below them was a demonic beast, a Pegasus with white wings. The great rock was too conspicuous. Hence Qin Wentian asked Little Rascal to transform into a Pegasus. Qing, or do you want a sip? Qin Wentian turned his head and passed the wine gourd over to Qing. However, he only saw Qing, silently glancing at him before directly ignoring his words. Since the beauty doesn't respond, I can only drink alone. Qin Wentian shook his head with a wry smile and continued to drink. Along the way, apart from cultivating, he occasionally wanted to chat with Qing. However, Qing was basically cold to him except for a rare moment when she would respond to him, which made Qin Wentian feel helpless. This lass was just too cold. But if she wasn't like that, she wouldn't be Qing. Squeak. The little fellow's voice came. Qin Wentian spat out a mouthful of wine and cursed in a low voice. You just drank a gourd of mine, and you want it again? Little Rascal unceasingly nodded its head, causing Qin Wentian to have a bitter smile on his face. He rapped Little Rascal on its head. Raise your head. Little Rascal inclined its head and stared at the skies. Its movements were extremely fluid. Qin Wentian directly tipped the gourd over, and a moment later, the contents of the gourd flowed into Little Rascal's mouth. Little Rascal's face was flushed red, as though it was extremely satisfied. It lowered its head and let out a series of indistinct squeaks as it continued flying forward. You're drunk again. Qin Wentian rolled his eyes and harshly rapped Little Rascal on its head. You little drunkard, I don't even feel safe sitting on top of you when you're drunk. I wonder what the other fellow looks like when he's drunk. Cold? Does he blush? Behind Qin Wentian, Qing's eyelashes flickered as she replied, I won't drink. After speaking, her silhouette flickered as she directly vanished from sight. It ran away again. You're still the most obedient. Qin Wentian mumbled as he rubbed Little Rascal's head. Evidently, Qin Wentian was already used to such a situation. I finished the wine. I need to buy more. Little Rascal seemed to understand his words and directly flew downwards, causing Qin Wentian to be speechless. Little Rascal was truly a little drunkard. Little Rascal swooped downwards. There was an extraordinary place below. This place was built on the peak of an ancient mountain in the city, and the buildings all exuded an imposing aura. Get up, get up! Qin Wentian rapped Little Rascal on its head. This was clearly a major power in the city. If Little Rascal wanted to drink wine, it should at least look for an inn. But very quickly, Qin Wentian was dumbfounded. A number of silhouettes soared up into the skies, directly standing in front of him. Their eyes were cold and gleamed with sharpness. Below, there was an old man with his hair tied up neatly. This old man had an extraordinary demeanor, and his entire body exuded a tyrannical aura. His cultivation base was actually at the 4th level of Heavenly Dipper. Beside the old man, there was a young lady in the prime of her youth. Her figure was lithe, and her features were pure and innocent. She looked to be about 22 or 23 years old, and her cultivation base was actually at the peak of Yuanfu. Around the two of them, there were several other experts. All of them had solemn expressions on their faces, as though they were preparing for battle. Their gazes were fixed on Qin Wentian, as though they were facing a great enemy. This strange atmosphere caused Qin Wentian to feel extremely depressed. Why did these people seem to view him with enmity? He didn't look like an evil person, and he had always been tempering his heart on the way here. Occasionally, he would do some good deeds, and would never offend anyone. Hence, he could only smile helplessly. Who told you to barge around recklessly? Qin Wentian cursed in a low voice, only to see the old man staring at him. Song Jia has already returned to Luo City. Sir, no matter what, your master is still someone from the Yin clan. Why must you be so overbearing? Could it be that you really want to snatch my granddaughter away? Qin Wentian couldn't help but smile bitterly. No wonder the people of the Song clan were preparing for battle. So it turned out that they had offended someone. Sir, you must have misunderstood. I'm merely passing by and wanted to ask for a cup of wine. Qin Wentian shook his head with a smile, causing the countenance of the old man from the Song clan to stiffen. 3 days ago, the young master of the Yin clan sent a letter to Luo City, saying that he would bring his men away today. Hence, the Song clan was on high alert, and no one dared to step into the vicinity. Everyone in Luo City knew of this matter. Yet who would have thought that Qin Wentian would enter by mistake? The Song clan naturally treated him as someone from the Yin clan. Sir, are you not someone from the Yin clan? The old man asked. Do I look like one? Qin Wentian smiled bitterly. The old man froze, carefully scrutinizing Qin Wentian. This person was extremely young, around 24 or 25 years old. Although it was difficult to tell Wuxia's age at a glance, based on the aura of Qin Wentian, he could vaguely sense that Qin Wentian's age was below 30. Such a young man. Even if his cultivation was extraordinary, it was impossible for him to be sent to the Song clan. Thinking of this, the old man shook his head. It seemed like he had mistaken Qin Wentian for someone else in a moment of desperation. He cupped his hands towards Qin Wentian and said, Seems like this is a misunderstanding. I, Song Tai, hereby apologize. Although Qin Wentian was very young, his aura was extraordinary. He must be an extraordinary character as well. Since it's a misunderstanding, it's nothing much. Qin Wentian waved his hands, not minding at all. Although my Song clan isn't a big clan, we do have a lot of good wine. If you don't mind, you can enter the manor and take whatever you want. It's just that the Song clan has some matters to attend to today, and this old man can't personally receive you. After you take your wine, please leave quickly to avoid any accidents. Song Tai waved his hands towards a steward behind him and said, Bring this little brother to retrieve the wine. If that's the case, Qin, thank you very much. Qin Wentian clasped his hands in thanks as he patted Little Rascal on its head. Little Rascal naturally understood their conversation, and swaggered its way down the mountain, following the caretaker into the mountain manor. Old man, what happened here? Qin Wentian curiously asked as he followed behind the steward. The old steward sighed. Little Miss has always been a kind person, and wouldn't easily become enemies with others. However, when something unexpected happens, you won't be able to avoid it even if you wanted to. If the clan lord knew this earlier, he wouldn't have sent Little Miss out to cultivate. But that would be a pity for Little Miss's talent. The old steward didn't seem to want to speak too much. He led Qin Wentian to the wine cellar in the backyard of the manor. There were many good wines stored here. These are the treasures of the manor. I wonder if we'll be able to use them in the future. The clan lord has also instructed that since little brother is here, It's fate that brought you here. If you like it, feel free to take whatever you like. After that, you can directly leave." The old steward turned and left, leaving Qin Wentian to take whatever he wanted. Seems like the Song clan has met with some trouble. Qin Wentian watched as the steward left. Evidently, the steward was prepared to share the tribulations with the others. Qin Wentian's palms trembled as several wines in the wine cellar floated up into the air, floating towards Qin Wentian as he kept them. After which, Qin Wentian's perception gushed out, heading in the direction of the Song clan. An instant later, he could see everything in that direction. The Song clan was still in a state of alert. Nobody in the surroundings soared into the air. Evidently, they already knew about what happened here. Only Qin Wentian foolishly came here to ask for wine. After some time, a black-robed middle-aged man whistled through the air. This middle-aged man had a sharp expression on his face, and an ancient sword strapped to his back. His gaze was as sharp as a blade as well, and a powerful sword might gushed forth, enveloping the people of the Song clan. That sword will contained a terrifying pressure, causing the people of the Song clan to instantly turn pale. This was their true enemy, a cultivation base at the peak of the 4th level of Heavenly Dipper. Evidently, the other party had already investigated the background of the Song clan, and directly sent out an expert that could crush their Song clan. The gaze of the black-robed middle-aged man landed on Song Jia as he coldly spoke. "Follow me." "Sir, my Song clan is willing to hand over half of our resources. Please tell young Master Yin to spare Song Jia." Song Tai knew that there was no hope for this battle. The aura of this black-robed middle-aged man was extremely terrifying. Terrifying sword chi cascaded downwards, enveloping the entire space. The black-colored sword on the back of the black-robed middle-aged man spat out. Although it wasn't unsheathed yet, a storm of sword chi already ravaged the entire space. "Do you want me to do it myself?" The black-robed middle-aged man coldly spoke. Song Tai's countenance turned ashen. "Since Sir is so insistent, our Song clan can only fight." "No." Song Jia, who was beside Song Tai, shook her head. "Grandpa, since the other party doesn't agree, let's forget it. I will go with them." "No." Song Tai shook his head. "Nothing can be changed." An expression of despair appeared on Song Jia's face as she shook her head at her grandpa. Even if the Song clan fought to the death, the ending wouldn't change. "Grandpa, this granddaughter is unfilial." Song Jia's silhouette flickered as she soared into the air, flying towards the black-robed middle-aged man. Song Jia, Song Tai, as well as the husband and wife beside him, all had ashen expressions as their auras fluctuated wildly. However, the black-robed middle-aged man merely snorted coldly as he unsheathed his sword, causing the storm of sword chi to intensify. "I've already agreed to leave with you." Song Jia spoke. Only then did the black-robed middle-aged man turn and leave with Song Jia. Qin Wentian watched on as a bitter smile could be seen on his face. In this world where cultivation reigned supreme, strength had always been the most important. There were simply too many injustices in the world, and he had also encountered many of them on his journey to Grand Shang. He would do his best to help whenever it was within his capabilities. But right now, the Yin clan's strength was extraordinary. If he were to act here, he might implicate the entire Song clan instead. Such troublesome matters, I have to at least collect some compensation. Qin Wentian mumbled as he glanced at the wine cellar. With a wave of his hand, all the wine in the cellar flew up and was kept by him, after which his silhouette flickered as he soared through the air. Chapter 475. After Song Jia left, Song Tai and the rest continued standing there. A cold light flickered in Song Tai's eyes as he stated, "A single word of rebuttal, that's going too far. Pass down my command, the Song clan is to be disbanded. Within a day everyone is to leave Luo City." The gazes of the crowd froze as they stared at Song Tai. Someone called out, "Clan Lord. Initially, I wanted to use resources to exchange for the Song clan's forgiveness. But now it seems like that was nothing but a fool's dream. Let's disband. In the future, no matter what happens, we won't implicate the Song clan." Song Tai's eyes flashed with coldness. He had already made his decision. The strong preyed on the weak, They could only lament the fact that the Song clan was too weak. The crowd dispersed. The manager who brought Qin Wentian to collect the wine was also in low spirits, wanting to drown his sorrows with wine. However, when he arrived at the wine cellar, he suddenly froze. The wine cellar was completely empty. There wasn't even a single jug of wine left. That brat is too much. He actually dared to fish in troubled waters. The manager shook his head and sighed. What he didn't know was that right now, Qin Wentian had been following the black-robed middle-aged man all the way out of Luo City. The black-robed middle-aged man only brought Song Jia with him, and had no intention to deal with Song Jia. The black-robed middle-aged man had a cultivation base at the peak of the 4th level of Heavenly Dipper. His speed was incomparably fast, covering a distance of 100,000 miles in a single day. Qin Wentian forcibly followed behind him for an entire day. An ancient city appeared in front of them. This city was even more vast and was countless times grander than Luo City. It was probably comparable to a main city of the 9-state city. The black-robed middle-aged man sped forwards. But at this moment, a voice drifted into his ears. What a beautiful woman! Ishem? The black-robed middle-aged man frowned. He halted his steps and turned his head, only to feel a surge of aura drifting over. Evidently, there was someone behind him. Leave the beauty behind, you scram. A cold voice rang out, causing the black-robed middle-aged man to snort coldly. A surge of sword intent abruptly gushed forth from him, incomparably tyrannical. Boom. At this moment, the black-robed middle-aged man's mind abruptly shuddered as a terrifying sword might directly penetrated his mind, causing his countenance to instantly turn pale. A sword cultivator, such a mandate of swords. How powerful! The black-robed middle-aged man clapped his hands and was about to draw his sword. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky. This figure was wearing a long robe and his face was slightly blurry, as if it was difficult to see through him. The black-robed middle-aged man groaned in pain as a towering sword might directly press down on his mind, penetrating through his body. The sword he was about to unsheath was actually forced back into its scabbard, as though it was no longer under his control. Such a will was too terrifying. Who are you? The middle-aged man in black raised his head and asked. His expression was slightly ugly. You don't deserve to know. Scram, or I'll kill you. The figure in the air coldly spoke. The black-robed middle-aged man clenched his fists as he turned and soared into the skies. The sword intent radiating from him howled madly as it shot toward Song Jia. Impudent. The figure in the air stomped down once more as an even more terrifying sword might penetrated through his body. The black-robed middle-aged man groaned in pain as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. The sword he shot towards Song Jia was instantly destroyed. He didn't dare to make any more movements as he sped away. Song Jia inclined her head and stared at the figure in the air, her countenance filled with terror. This person was so powerful. With a single step, the black-robed middle-aged man was forced back. With a second step, the black-robed middle-aged man was injured. Such a cultivation base should be at the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. However, an intense worry could be seen in her heart. The tone of this person earlier was extremely frivolous. Senior. Song Jia's voice trembled slightly. Don't worry. Although you are a beauty, this lord has seen many peak-grade beauties before. I don't have much interest in you. The figure in the air faintly spoke as he soared into the skies. This scene caused Song Jia to heave a sigh of relief as she bowed. Many thanks, Senior. Seeing that the figure in the air had completely vanished, Song Jia turned her head back as a trace of hesitation flashed in her eyes. After which, she didn't choose to return but chose to fly towards the ancient city ahead instead. Behind Song Jia, Qin Wentian sat on the back of Little Rascal who had transformed into a Pegasus, feeling extremely depressed. He had chased her all the way here and saved her because he didn't want to implicate the Song clan. If he spared the black-robed middle-aged man, he would naturally return to report this matter. But who would have thought that Song Jia actually chose not to flee? Drinking a mouthful of wine from the gourd in his hand, Qin Wentian shook his head and bitterly smiled. Who asked me to empty your wine cellar? Seems like I have to be a good person to the end. Protecting a beauty can also be considered a form of tempering. Qin Wentian mumbled to himself, as though he was consoling himself. After which, He continued following Song Jia as they entered the ancient city. This city was named Qianqing City, one of the 7 great king cities of Grand Shang. The Grand Shang Empire was different from the Grand Xia Empire. The imperial authority of the Grand Shang Empire was extremely powerful, and other than a few other transcendent powers, no one would dare to go against them. The 7 king cities were all under the control of the royal clan of Grand Shang. They were the territories of the royal clan of Grand Shang, helping the royal clan to govern the 8 directions. They were the main cities of a region and were extremely prosperous. A royal city could even be divided into many smaller cities, and there were even mountains and lakes in the middle of the royal city. In the Grand Shang Empire, the various powers would send their talented juniors to the king city for cultivation. This was because there were many major sects in the king city. Song Jia was precisely like that. He was a disciple of one of the strongest sects in the Qianqing city. However, because he offended a young man, his sect didn't protect him, causing his clan to be implicated as well. After entering the city, Song Jia first found an inn to stay in. Qin Wentian followed her and stayed in the room next to hers. This inn was extremely small, and the rooms were all connected together. It was easy for others to disturb one's cultivation, and as for matters of secrecy, it was naturally not easy to do so. However, in such a large city, the price of a good inn was extremely high, and one would need to spend yuan meteor stones just to stay there. Those who chose to stay in such a small inn were mostly Wuxia with weaker cultivation bases. They didn't even have enough yuan meteor stones on them to support their cultivation. How would they dare to spend their days in luxury? Although it was a taboo for Wuxia to use his perception to spy on others, Qin Wentian still paid close attention to Song Jia's every move. Song Jia's heart was filled with worries. She sat alone in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. She untied her hair, allowing her black hair to cascade down like a waterfall. After which, she took off her outer robes and began grooming herself in front of the mirror. At the corners of her eyes, there were traces of tears. There's a beauty in the Song clan named Song Jia. She condensed her martial soul at the age of 12, and stepped into Yuanfu at the age of 18. Grandfather, father, you all have high hopes for me, but so what? In this world where cultivation reigns supreme, one's conscience can be obliterated. In order to curry favor with the king manor, the Yin clan didn't hesitate to sacrifice so many lives just to obtain the Crimson Halberd. Outsiders didn't dare to say anything, and they even wanted to make use of their fellow sect members. Song Jia mumbled. Tears streamed down her face. Her uncle Li, who had always been protecting her, had died tragically. She did everything she could to get her clan back, yet the Yin clan refused to let her go. They even sent a message to capture her within 3 days, or else the Song clan would be annihilated. What else could she do? She could only wait obediently. Today, although I was saved by Senior, if I were to return now, wouldn't I implicate my clan? This matter, at the very most, can be resolved with my death. Song Jia was still sobbing, and only after a long time did she walk to the bed and lie down, staring out of the window in a daze. A young girl at the prime of her life, who would be willing to die. However, in order to not implicate her clan, she had no other choice. Qin Wentian's heart stirred when he heard Song Jia's words. In this era where cultivation reigns supreme, there were simply too many people who would resort to unscrupulous methods for the sake of benefits. Although he, Qin Wentian, was also soaked in blood, as a human, he would still protect the purity of his heart. Seems like there won't be any trouble tonight, Qin Wentian mused. After which, he brought Little Rascal, who had transformed into his true form, out of the room. Night descended, yet the Qianqing city was still as bustling as ever. Lanterns lit up the entire city. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered, and an instant later he arrived at an inn. Inside an inn, the information network was the best, and it was the easiest place for him to gather information. After sitting in the inn for a moment, he saw a person who loved to gossip departing. Hence, he followed after him and blocked the path of that person in a corner. Sir, what's the matter? That person frowned when he saw Qin Wentian blocking his way. He released his aura at the peak of Yuanfu. Humph. Qin Wentian coldly snorted, his words penetrating deep into the depths of his heart. His eyes flickered with a cold light, causing his entire body to tremble. He knew that he had met a terrifying character. "Senior, what can I do for you?" That person's attitude instantly changed. "What is this scarlet halberd? What did the Yin clan do for it?" Qin Wentian asked, his words causing that person's countenance to stiffen. He glanced to his left and right, and only after confirming that there was no one else did he reply, "Senior, the scarlet halberd is the scarlet demon halberd. This halberd was forged by a 5th-ranked weaponsmith, Grandmaster Qi Yezi. The Xian King's manor Shang Qi was extremely powerful, and his cultivation base had already stepped into the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. After a certain young master of the Yin clan learned of this, he sought out Qi Yezi to forge a halberd for him. Qi Yezi was extremely dissatisfied, and Qi Yezi said that if he didn't go crazy, he wouldn't be able to forge the most tyrannical halberd. After the young master of the Yin clan heard of this, he slaughtered Qi Yezi's entire clan, causing Qi Yezi to sink into madness. The young master of the Yin clan continued to force him to forge the halberd, and Qi Yezi actually agreed. However, after the halberd was forged, he sacrificed his life to the halberd, and that halberd became known as the Scarlet Demon Halberd. The Yin clan sent people to retrieve it, but in the end, all of them died. The young master of the Yin clan wasn't willing to give up, and he sealed off the entire area, preventing them from leaving the halberd, causing the entire area to become a place of death. After that, the young master of the Yin clan decided to gather a group of outstanding geniuses to attempt to retrieve the halberd. The voice of this person was extremely soft, as though he was afraid others would hear him. After Qin Wentian heard this, his heart was filled with rage as he coldly replied, "Since the Scarlet Demon Halberd has already been forged, why didn't the Yin clan or the King Manor directly send their ascendants to retrieve it? Why did they have to implicate the innocent? This matter has already caused the Yin clan to suffer criticism. It's just that no one dared to speak out. The King Manor naturally wouldn't act because of their reputation. Young master of the Yin clan has to settle this yourself. Both the Yin clan and the King Manor can stay out of this matter. After all, they still need to maintain their face on the surface." That person spoke in a low voice, causing Qin Wentian's heart to burn with rage. After asking for the location, his silhouette flickered as he sped towards the place where Qi Yezi resided. Not too long after, Qin Wentian arrived at a place of death in the Xianqing city. Under the cover of the night sky, the corpse Qi here was extremely dense. He stood on a balcony and stared ahead. Under the moonlight, a scarlet demon halberd that was the color of blood could be seen towering there, emitting a roar of unwillingness, as though it was the unwillingness of Qi Yezi's soul. Chapter 476. Qin Wentian stared at the blood-colored demonic halberd embedded deep into the ground as his heart trembled. What a heavy sense of resentment. This Qi Yezi was a 5th-ranked weaponsmith grandmaster, and had an esteemed status. He would definitely be respected by others, but who would have thought that the young master of the Yin clan would be such a silkpants, forcing a 5th-ranked weaponsmith grandmaster into such a desperate situation, killing his entire clan and even sacrificing his blood to the halberd. Even after his death, he still wanted to kill the young master of the Yin clan. Hence, those who tried to retrieve the halberd were all killed. Who would have thought that the young master of the Yin clan would be so lucky to have escaped and sealed this entire region, wanting to see what was so strange about the halberd, causing the deaths of so many people. With a flicker of his silhouette, Qin Wentian dashed towards the direction of the Scarlet Demon Halberd. The nearer he got to the halberd, the more he felt a terrifying energy affecting his state of mind, causing his heart to feel uneasy, as well as irritable. Finally, Qin Wentian arrived near the Scarlet Demon Halberd. Abruptly, he only felt a blood-colored glow enveloping him. The sky was incomparably dark, and the surroundings were littered with skeletons. Blood dyed the heavens and earth red, and numerous terrifying demons howled as they rushed towards him. A ghost with disheveled hair dashed towards him, its eyes filled with hatred, causing the hearts of those who saw it to tremble. Beams of blood-colored light gushed into Qin Wentian's sea of consciousness. However, his eyes were clear as he calmly stared at the vengeful spirit in front of him. He then spoke in a low voice, "Senior, my state of heart will not be affected by dream intents." At this moment, Qin Wentian already knew what sort of energy this was. Qi Yezi was most definitely proficient in dream intents as well. He was able to seep into the minds of others, causing them to fall into a trance. It was just that when Qin Wentian was tempering himself in the royal tomb, he had already experienced how terrifying the dreamscape was. Right now, Qi Yezi's dream intents had no way to affect his state of heart. That departed spirit seemed to be unwilling to give up. It continued howling as it lunged towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian silently shook his head as he spoke in a low voice. Senior's resentment has already caused so many deaths. Yet your enemy is still safe and sound. Why must you do this? As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wentian continued stepping forwards, moving towards the scarlet demon halberd. Stretching out his palms, he grabbed onto the halberd as he faintly stated, "Senior, please direct all your resentment towards me." The instant he brandished the scarlet demon halberd in his hands, a towering amount of resentment gushed towards him. His mind was in a state of chaos. This dream devil intent was trying to shake his memories. However, Qin Wentian's state of mind was too tough. His resistance to this kind of power could only be described as terrifying. That time in the royal tomb, to him, was like a cycle of reincarnation. It was too cruel, tempering his state of heart to the point of transformation. Right now, this dream devil intent couldn't shake him at all. Junior doesn't dare to say for sure. But if there's a chance, I will use this halberd forged with the heart's blood to slay your enemy for you. After speaking, Qin Wentian's palms trembled as he sliced open his finger, allowing his blood to flow into the runic patterns on the halberd. At the same time, his will seeped into the halberd, erasing the traces of resentment left behind by Qi Yezi. A moment later, his hand trembled as he pulled out the scarlet demon halberd and put it away. "Let this place return to peace," Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice, after which his silhouette flickered as he vanished from sight. Early the next morning, the news of the scarlet demon halberd disappearing circulated, causing many to sigh in shock. Vanished, the halberd was actually taken away by someone? Could it be that the Yin clan finally sent out a celestial phenomenon ascendant to forcefully take the halberd away? As they thought of this, the crowd silently confirmed that this must be the case. The Yin clan secretly took away the halberd, and the crowd didn't dare to say anything, only occasionally discussing it in secret. However, they didn't know that a certain young master of the Yin clan was infuriated by this. He spent so much effort to obtain a tyrannical ancient halberd for Shang-Chi, even going so far as to make a move against a fifth-ranked weaponsmith, causing his reputation to be tarnished. Yet in the end, the scarlet demon halberd was actually taken away by someone else. Not only that, there was another piece of news that made him extremely unhappy yesterday. The men he sent to capture Song Jia were injured by an expert and Song Jia was taken away by someone else. These two matters made him extremely unhappy. As for Song Jia, she was currently still in the inn. She had just woken up and was having her meal downstairs when she heard the news of the scarlet demon halberd being taken away. She couldn't help but feel sorrow in her heart. Most probably, this was done by someone from the Yin clan. "Miss Song, what a coincidence." At this moment, a voice drifted over, causing Song Jia's beautiful eyes to freeze. She inclined her head and stared at the handsome young man walking over, feeling extremely surprised. "Why are you here?" Song Jia saw that Qin Wentian was carrying a pet in his arms, appearing extremely carefree and at ease. "I was wandering around and didn't expect to meet Miss Song here." Qin Wentian smiled as he sat opposite to Song Jia. "Earlier, Miss Song was threatened by someone, yet now you are free. You must have had some good fortune. Why didn't you return to Luo City?" Song Jia's countenance dimmed when she heard this, after which she shook her head and replied, "I understand Yin Qing very well. He wouldn't rest until he achieved his goal. If I return, he would still send people to my clan. At that time, if I'm not around, wouldn't I implicate my loved ones? In that case, do you intend to walk right into his trap? This isn't something that your clan would want to see, right?" Qin Wentian asked. Today, the Xian King City will be hosting a treasure-seizing assembly at the Heavenly Mountain. At that time, all the major powers will be there, including Yin Cheng. I'll apologize to him in front of everyone and beg for his forgiveness, hoping that he would spare me out of consideration for his face. Although this is an extremely unbearable act, if I die, my clan would surely be heartbroken. Unless I have no other choice, I don't want to become a skeleton at such a young age. Song Jia calmly continued. In life there will always be times when we have no choice but to lower our heads. If I matured earlier and didn't spout nonsense, I wouldn't have ended up like this today. Qin Wentian stared at the calm Song Jia as he sighed in his heart. Indeed, experiences could change people. After experiencing such a thing, Song Jia's state of mind had clearly changed. I have nothing to do, and the treasure-seizing assembly is surely going to be extremely lively. Let me join in the fun as well. Qin Wentian casually laughed. Yet he was sighing in his heart. Initially, he wanted to silently save Song Jia, but now that this woman wanted to walk right into his trap, how troublesome. However, there was no way for Qin Wentian to watch her walk to her death. Taking the wine of others is truly troublesome. Qin Wentian silently mused. Song Jia inclined her head and glanced at Qin Wentian before nodding her head. It's fine if you go. But after we reach the heavenly mountain, don't travel together with me. I don't want you to be implicated by my matters. Qin Wentian didn't reply. After the two of them ate some snacks, they continued on their way. When Song Jia saw Little Rascal transforming into a Pegasus, her eyes involuntarily shone with a bright light. This is Little Rascal's transformation technique. Come on, we still need you to lead the way. Qin Wentian smiled at Song Jia. Song Jia hesitated for a moment before nodding her head and hopping onto Little Rascal's back. Momentarily, Little Rascal soared up into the air, flying in the direction of the Heavenly Mountain in the Xian King City. The Heavenly Mountain was located in the western region of the Xian King City. The entire western region of the Heavenly Mountain was surrounded by a mountain range that extended far into the distance. Although there were countless experts in the Xian King City, there were still many mysterious places in the Heavenly Mountain range that had yet to be explored. Many secluded cultivators would choose to cultivate in the Heavenly Mountain range. And precisely because of the mysteriousness of the Heavenly Mountain, there would often be strange treasures appearing there. As time passed, the Heavenly Mountain range would host a treasure-seizing assembly once every half a year. On the main peak of the Heavenly Mountain, the number of people who came here to trade their treasures was innumerable. However, at this moment, Song Jia wasn't in the mood to do so. She walked on the mountain path as she spoke to Qin Wentian. The treasure-seizing assembly every year is divided into different levels. Those at the Yuanfu realm and below would be gathered at the foot of the mountain. Those below the 6th level of Heavenly Dipper would be gathered at the waist of the mountain. Yin Cheng's cultivation base has already broken through to the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. For this year's treasure-seizing assembly, he would definitely invite some of the major powers in the Xian King City to gather at the waist of the mountain, sending people to appraise their treasures. This has always been their style. Song Jia slowly spoke. Let's part ways here. I'll head to the waist of the mountain. You don't need to care about me anymore. Qin Wentian nodded his head lightly. Song Jia didn't expect him to agree so readily, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of disappointment in her heart. When humans were in despair, they would always want to find something to rely on. Although she didn't want to implicate Qin Wentian, but seeing how Qin Wentian didn't even bother to say a word of pleasantries, she couldn't help but feel hurt. Turning around, Song Jia let out a bitter smile before leaving the area. Little Rascal had already reverted back to its original form, and was carried in Qin Wentian's embrace. As they walked on the mountain path, Qin Wentian's perception extended outwards, and an instant later, he arrived before a stall. Old man, are these divine inscription scrolls? Qin Wentian glanced at the ancient scrolls on the ground as he asked the old man standing in front of the stall. Little fellow, your judgment isn't bad. You should have some understanding of divine inscriptions. These scrolls are inscribed with a shield of divine inscriptions that can withstand an attack from experts below the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. It's not a bad life-saving treasure. The old man stroked his beard as he smiled. Qin Wentian lightly shook his head. To him, these scrolls weren't of much use. No matter how powerful the divine inscriptions were, they wouldn't be of much use. If he really met an opponent he couldn't defeat, These scrolls would be used up in a single attack, and he wouldn't be able to escape. Unless, during a chaotic battle, these scrolls would be of great use. Are there any divine inscription scrolls that contain the power of space and are capable of teleportation? Qin Wentian asked. Although he could inscribe divine inscriptions, he wasn't proficient in spatial energy. Back then, Qin Zheng had one, and when he was cultivating in the 36 mountain peaks, he was able to ascend any of the mountains. Nope. The old man shook his head. Not only do you need to be proficient in divine inscriptions, you also need to be a grandmaster proficient in spatial energy in order to create these scrolls. Depending on the teleportation effect, the value of these scrolls will be different. Divine inscriptions that can allow you to teleport across long distances are priceless. You need to go to the mountain waste and try your luck. But even if there are any, I'm afraid you won't be able to obtain them. Thank you, old man, for your guidance. Qin Wentian clasped his hands as he casually smiled. After which, he slowly walked towards the mountain waste. He naturally knew how valuable the divine inscriptions he spoke of were. But now that he was roaming the world, it would be even better if he had some life-saving treasures. Chapter 477. There was naturally a reason why the Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly used the words treasure seizing. This time around, it wasn't a simple gathering. There were two truly important locations. One was at the peak of the mountain. It was the gathering place for those at the peak of the Heavenly Dipper Sovereigns. That place was extremely mysterious and wasn't open to those below the 6th level of Heavenly Dipper. Because some of the treasures that appeared there might be exceedingly valuable, there might even be celestial phenomenon ascendants participating. The other location was located at the waist of the mountain. Just like what Song Jia had said to Qin Wentian, Yincheng invited everyone to gather there. In truth, it wasn't just Yincheng, it was the famous characters of the Xian King city who would all gather there to seize treasures. As for the treasure-seizing assembly, it meant that there would be people competing for treasures. The person presenting the treasure would weigh the value of the treasure and call out the item he wanted to trade. Given the number of people gathered there, as long as you could take out a valuable treasure, you wouldn't need to worry that there wouldn't be people competing for it. You would definitely be able to leave in satisfaction. This was the so-called treasure seizing. For every treasure seizing assembly, because the peak of the mountain was too high, it was extremely mysterious and ordinary people had no way to observe it. Hence, the treasure seizing assembly held at the waist of the mountain would always be the most popular. Qin Wentian continued up the mountain path. But how high was his vision? He naturally wouldn't be interested in these ordinary items. During these years, he had fought in the wind and rain and had accumulated quite a bit of wealth. If he could exchange for some of the items he needed during the treasure-seizing assembly, he wouldn't have come here in vain. At the waist of the mountain, there was an extremely large piece of flat land that resembled a long corridor that extended all the way to the main peak of the Heavenly Mountain. This place was a boiling cauldron of voices as tens of thousands of people gathered here to spectate. There was only a single ancient path in the center. That was the path used by those presenting treasures. Following the ancient path, there was a vast empty space in the center. Those presenting treasures could walk there and take out their treasures, calling out the items they wanted to trade for. Looking further ahead, there should have been a precipice. However, at the side of the precipice, numerous pavilions could be seen. There were many silhouettes sitting there, drinking tea and chatting. These people were the key characters of the treasure-seizing assembly, and were all extremely famous in the Xian King city. Only they had the qualifications to appear here. They were the main characters of the treasure-seizing assembly, because the treasures of those who came to present their treasures would most likely be taken away by these people. As expected of the treasure-seizing assembly of the Heavenly Mountain, Qin Wentian thought to himself as he blended into the crowd. He saw two people beside him whispering to each other, discussing which outstanding people the other side was facing. Qin Wentian turned his gaze towards the pavilions by the side of the precipice. There were over 10 groups there, and the majority of those seated in the main seats were young geniuses. After all, for Heavenly Dipper sovereigns below the age of 50, they were all Heavenly Dipper sovereigns from the peak sects and clans of the Xian King city. Qin Wentian's gaze landed on one of the two main seats in the middle. The person on the left had a cultivation base at the third level of Heavenly Dipper. His skin was extremely fair, giving off a gloomy and cold feeling. Although there was a smile in his eyes, the occasional gleam of sharpness in his eyes contained a hint of coldness. With a single glance, one could tell that this person was a ruthless character. Not only that, he had an innate sense of arrogance. From the words of the people beside him, this person was none other than the young master of the Yin clan, Yin Cheng. Although Yin Cheng had a grudge with Song Jia, he wasn't a useless silk pants. This year, he was only 25 years old, and had already broken through to the third level of Heavenly Dipper. His talent could be considered outstanding even in the Yin clan. Not only that, he dared to make a move against a 5th-ranked weaponsmith, exterminating his entire clan. From this, one could very well imagine how ruthless he was. Naturally, the prerequisite for him to do so was that the authority bestowed upon him by his clan was exceedingly great. This was why he dared to make a move against a 5th-ranked weaponsmith. However, Yincheng wasn't the most dazzling character today. The person beside him attracted even more attention compared to him. This person was a female. Her beauty was definitely on the level of a calamity. Her skin was as fair as snow, and there were no flaws to be found on her facial features. What was even more outstanding was her demeanor, exuding a sense of nobility and coldness, causing others to not dare to look her in the eyes. But precisely because of this, the hearts of the spectators were filled with fantasies of wanting to get close to her. However, they only dared to fantasize about it in their hearts. Every time the gaze of this female swept past them, many would lower their heads, not daring to meet her eyes. This female was one of the most famous beauties in the Xianqing city. In terms of beauty, she could be ranked in the top 3 in the city, and in terms of birth, she was a princess of the King Manor. Regardless of her appearance or birth, it was sufficient to cause others to feel ashamed of their inferiority. Qin Wentian's gaze was also attracted by this female, and he couldn't help but cast a few more glances at her. It was the nature of men to love beauty, and it was only natural that some would be unable to be swayed by beauty, while some wouldn't be able to control themselves. Qin Wentian stared at her, but based on his temperament, he only felt that this female was extraordinary. He wouldn't be mesmerized by her. After all, in terms of beauty, how many people could be compared to the empire-toppling Mo Qingcheng or the Ice Maiden Qing? Shang Yu's gaze swept over the crowd, and abruptly, she furrowed her brows as her gaze landed on a young man. This young man was clad in white, and had an ancient sword strapped to his back. It was simple, clean, and exuded a transcendent aura. Yet he actually dared to stare directly at her. A sharp glint of light flickered in Shang Yu's eyes. Qin Wentian naturally sensed it, and he involuntarily smiled as he shifted his gaze away. Only then did Shang Yu's eyes shift away from him. Qin Wentian then turned his gaze onto the others. Those who were able to gather together with Yincheng and Shang Yu naturally weren't ordinary people. To the left of Yincheng, there were several young men and women sitting there. All of them exuded an extraordinary aura, and there were even some with cultivation bases at the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. They were disciples from the number 1 sect in the Xianqing city, the Heaven-Shocking Sword sect. The disciples of the Heaven-Shocking Sword sect were all proficient in sword arts, and their combat prowess was unparalleled. Yincheng was also a disciple of the Heaven-Shocking Sword sect. Not only him, even Song Jia was from the same sect as him. Song Jia had once dared to contradict him in public, and because of that, she was hunted down. To the right of Shang Yu, there were people from the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan, one of the 3 strongest aristocrat clans in the Xianqing city. And to the right, there were people from the Windrock Aristocrat clan. The Yin clan, Golden Fire Aristocrat clan, and Windrock Aristocrat clan. Among them, the Yin clan was the strongest, while the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan and Windrock Aristocrat clan were slightly weaker. However, they were still extremely terrifying, having celestial phenomenon ascendants in their ranks. Other than them, the other characters seated in the pavilions were all from major sections. Their strength and status were extraordinary, which was why they had the qualifications to sit there. Before this, Qin Wentian had already understood the strength of Grand Shang. The 7 major powers in the Royal Shang Empire were already comparable to the transcendent powers of Grand Xia. And as for the strongest royal capital, there was no need to mention the fact that there were peak-level celestial phenomenon ascendants in the Royal Shang Empire. There were also a few other major sects that had strength comparable to them. The Grand Shang Empire was an entire level higher compared to the Grand Xia Empire. Now that he was in a king city, although he had many methods, it would naturally be better if he could obtain some life-saving treasures. After all, he was alone now. As long as he could preserve his life, there was nothing for him to worry about. As for Qing, she was much more powerful compared to him. There was no need for him to worry about her. Princess, I see that everyone is already prepared. Why don't we start presenting our treasures? At this moment, Yincheng turned his gaze onto Shang Yu as he asked with a smile. Today, I'm only a participant. You decide. Shang Yu's voice wasn't loud, but it was extremely clear. Right. Yincheng smiled and nodded, after which, he turned his gaze onto the crowd as he continued. For this year's treasure-seizing assembly, I believe that those who present their treasures will not disappoint the princess. As long as you take out your treasures, feel free to speak your mind. In the treasure-seizing assembly, those who presented their treasures wanted yuan meteor stones. But there were also those who wanted innate techniques or divine weapons, hoping to trade for them. When the crowd heard Yincheng's words, the atmosphere instantly turned lively. However, those who presented their treasures here without any valuable treasures wouldn't be able to enter the eyes of these people. Hence, the treasures traded here in the treasure-seizing assembly were all extraordinary treasures. At this moment, a silhouette walked out from the ancient pathway, causing the gazes of the crowd to stiffen. The person who walked out was actually an extremely beautiful young lady. Not only that, she didn't mask her face to conceal her identity. Yincheng frowned as a sinister light flickered in his eyes. This Song Jia actually dared to appear in front of him? Those from the heaven-shocking sword sect also had looks of bewilderment on their faces as they stared at Song Jia. Song Jia directly walked to the center of the crowd. She stared at Yincheng as she spoke. Song Jia spoke nonsense earlier and offended senior brother Yin, ruining your reputation. I'm here today to apologize. Senior brother, please punish Song Jia accordingly. Yincheng coldly snorted in his heart. This Song Jia was truly intelligent. After escaping, she delivered herself to his doorstep. Not only that, in such a situation, in consideration of his face, he wouldn't be too ruthless to her. She wanted to use such a method to protect herself? What a joke. However, wasn't her thinking a little too naive? Although Yincheng was thinking this in his heart, a smile could be seen on his face. Song Jia, you slandered your senior brother Yincheng in public, and you still have the face to beg for mercy? At this moment, a young man from the heaven-shocking sword sect had a cold expression on his face as he stared at Song Jia. This person had already been interested in Song Jia back when they were still in the heaven-shocking sword sect. However, Song Jia was too arrogant and proud. Now that she had offended Yincheng, how could she survive? Song Jia gritted her teeth as she stared at that person. This person was one of her senior brothers named Yang Ting. His talent was outstanding, but he had a lecherous personality. He had harassed her many times before, but she refused, causing him to hate her in her heart. Song Jia, you have tarnished my reputation in public. Originally, I should have challenged you to a duel and killed you. But on account that we are both from the same sect, I shall spare your life and allow you to be my slave. Today, since I am presenting a treasure, I shall be the one presenting the treasure. The treasure I'm presenting is none other than this female. Her value is 1 low-grade yuan meteor stone. If there's anyone who is willing, they can trade for her. Song Jia, are you willing? Song Jia's countenance paled as she bit her lips. Indeed, this Yincheng didn't want to spare her. Not only did he treat her as a slave, he even wanted to trade for a low-grade yuan meteor stone. I'm willing. Song Jia's voice trembled as she agreed. In her heart, if there was no way out, she would rather die than implicate her clan. At this moment, the crowd naturally knew who this female was. They all felt pity for her in their hearts. But what status did the Yin clan and Yincheng have in Xianqing City? Although many people knew about this, no one dared to say anything. Now that Song Jia had said this in front of so many people, how could she not suffer revenge? Since this is the case, on account that we are from the same sect, Song Jia, I shall accept you as my slave. At the same time, I don't want you to fall into the hands of evildoers. Since you are from the same sect, I will naturally take care of you. At this moment, Song Jia's senior brother Yang Ting spoke once more, as though he was showing kindness to Song Jia. However, an evil light flickered in the depths of his eyes. If Song Jia fell into his hands, wouldn't it be as simple as serving tea? Although those from the heaven-shocking sword sect understood Yang Ting's personality, Yang Ting's cultivation base was at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. His talent was extraordinary, and in addition to the fact that Yin Cheng was the mastermind behind all this, no one was willing to offend Yin Cheng for the sake of Song Jia. This female is mine. However, at this moment, a voice drifted out from the crowd, causing the countenances of the crowd to stiffen. They turned their gazes onto the crowd, searching for the person who spoke. Chapter 478. A few moments later, the crowd found the person who spoke. This person was extremely young, only around 24 or 25 years of age. He was clad in white and had a clean and handsome demeanor. His aura was retracted, and he was even hugging an adorable pet. The only thing that could tell that he was a Wuxia was the sword strapped to his back. This person was none other than Qin Wentian. Yin Cheng stared at Qin Wentian as a cold light flickered in his eyes. Shang Yu, who was beside him, had a look of disdain in her eyes when she saw Qin Wentian. No wonder this person was so brazen earlier, daring to look at her in the eyes. So it turned out that he was a lecherous person who used his looks to boost his courage. Now that he saw Song Jia, he actually wanted to take advantage of her and bring her away with a Yuan meteor stone. However, the rules of the treasure-seizing assembly were there. How could it be Qin Wentian's turn to bring Song Jia away? Song Jia started. She didn't expect that Qin Wentian would follow her here. She couldn't help but cast a glance at Qin Wentian, wanting him to give up. Evidently, she didn't want to implicate Qin Wentian any further. However, Qin Wentian acted as though he didn't see it. He was hugging a snow-white puppy with a smile on his face, as though he had just done something extremely ordinary. As for Yang Ting, killing intent flashed in his eyes. This person was courting death. Do you know the rules of the treasure-seizing assembly? Yin Cheng smiled as he stared at Qin Wentian. I do. If only one person bids, the treasure will be seized. If more than one person bids, the treasure will be seized by force. Qin Wentian spoke. The reason why the best treasures in the treasure-seizing assembly were only available to those from the major powers was because no one dared to compete. Using force to seize treasures, whoever won would be the one to seize the treasure. Not only that, during a battle using force, death was a common occurrence. Since this is the case, are you sure you want to bid? Yin Cheng asked again. This girl is so beautiful, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if she could serve me? Qin Wentian smiled and nodded. Momentarily, Yin Cheng glanced at Yang Ting as a trace of a smile flashed in his eyes. At the same time, Yin Cheng continued. Is there anyone else who wishes to participate? No one said anything. They naturally didn't want to get involved and offend Yin Cheng. Since that's the case, Yang Ting, go ahead and fight this person for the treasure. Yin Cheng coldly stated. A moment later, a smile appeared on Yang Ting's face as he stepped out, arriving at the vast space in the center. His gaze swept towards Song Jia as a smile that was not a smile appeared on his face. Junior sister, don't worry. I will definitely not allow you to fall into the hands of others. Song Jia's countenance stiffened. She turned her head back and stared at Qin Wentian, her countenance extremely unsightly to behold. Yang Ting was a ruthless person, yet his cultivation base was extremely high. How could Qin Wentian be able to contend against him with a cultivation base at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper? And given Qin Wentian's age, even if his talent was outstanding, it was already an amazing feat for him to be able to break through to the Heavenly Dipper realm. Yang Ting would definitely not show mercy to him. Are you ready? Yang Ting walked towards Qin Wentian as he faintly spoke. If not, if I act now, I'm afraid you won't have a chance anymore. As the sound of his voice faded, a powerful sword chi erupted forth from Yang Ting. His sword was unsheathed as a powerful sword might gushed forth. Step by step, he advanced towards Qin Wentian. His sword floated above his head, crackling with lightning. Done. Qin Wentian nodded his head lightly as he sensed the sword might of his opponent. The sword sheath on his back trembled violently, emitting cracking sounds. Maybe, a single sword strike is enough. As the sound of Yang Ting's voice faded, a thunderous boom rang out. His sword was like a thunderclap, carrying with it a terrifying might as it pierced through the air. The spectators felt as though they could see a sword of lightning piercing through the air, rushing towards Qin Wentian. Upon seeing this dazzling sword strike, the spectators couldn't help but feel pity for Qin Wentian. Those from the heaven-shocking sword sect were all exceedingly proficient in swordsmanship. No matter what kind of mandates they were proficient in, or what type of martial spirit they had, they would be able to complement their swordsmanship. Yang Ting's sword strike was akin to a thunderbolt arcing through the air, akin to a raging tempest tearing apart the surface of the sea. Even if Qin Wentian was at the same cultivation level as Yang Ting, he would definitely be heavily injured by this single strike. Only to see that Qin Wentian's silhouette was different. That sky-piercing sword strike instantly arrived before Qin Wentian. The spectators couldn't bear to watch any longer. If this sword strike landed, Qin Wentian would die for sure. Song Jia's countenance paled as she closed her eyes. She couldn't bear to see Qin Wentian being killed by a single sword strike. Boom! A thunderous sound rang out. The eyes of the spectators abruptly shone with a resplendent light as they stared ahead. They only saw that when the thunderous sword descended upon Qin Wentian, it actually halted. In front of Qin Wentian, there seemed to be a mystical aura. It wasn't extremely powerful, yet it gave off a strange feeling. It was as though as long as he stood there, the sword wouldn't be able to kill him. Yang Ting's countenance abruptly turned ashen. He stared at Qin Wentian, feeling as though his sword was being interfered with. Die. Yang Ting stretched his finger out as he roared, pushing the sword in front of Qin Wentian towards Qin Wentian, wanting to lacerate Qin Wentian's head. However, the white-robed young man stepped forward. The sword, accompanied by his advance, actually retreated a step backwards. At this moment, the trembling sword sheath on Qin Wentian's back finally moved. A crisp sound rang out as the sword was halfway out of its sheath. Yang Ting retreated explosively, only to see fresh blood seeping out of his throat. He halted his steps, his entire body trembling as he felt a chill on his neck. Yang Ting stretched his hands out and touched his neck. It was ice cold to the touch, and traces of fresh blood could be seen. His countenance paled as his heart pounded madly. Just a hair's breadth away from that sword, and his life would have been ended. The sword in front of Qin Wentian slumped to the ground. With a wave of his hand, a yuan meteor stone flew out, landing in front of Yin Cheng as he emotionlessly stated, "This girl is mine now." At this moment, Yin Cheng still hadn't recovered from his shock. If he was the one facing that sword earlier, what would he have done? The soundwave attack was formless and formless. This person had actually comprehended the will of the Tao of Swords, killing someone in the blink of an eye. Upon seeing the yuan meteor stone flying over, Yin Cheng caught it and stared at Qin Wentian as he asked, "Who are you?" "A nameless nobody not worth mentioning," Qin Wentian faintly replied. "Since I'm here today to seize the treasure, how can I not have a seat?" After which, he stepped out, walking towards an empty pavilion at the side of the cliff. He casually sat down and spoke to Song Jia. "Why are you not coming over to serve me?" Song Jia froze. She stared at Qin Wentian for a moment before jogging over to Qin Wentian's back. Staring at the back view of the white-robed young man, she drew in a deep breath. So it turned out that the person who came to her house to beg for wine was actually so powerful. At the very least, his cultivation base was at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper, and his combat prowess was even more terrifying. Yang Ting's sword stopped right in front of him, yet it couldn't even withstand a single strand of sword chi. "Help me massage my back," Qin Wentian faintly stated, causing Song Jia to start. Qin Wentian turned his head and glared at her. "Oh." Song Jia nodded her head. After which, she began to massage Qin Wentian's back. Her heart was filled with bewilderment. She didn't know what Qin Wentian was thinking. Could it be that he had the same thoughts as Yang Ting? If Qin Wentian knew of Songjia's thoughts, he would definitely be angered to death by her. This Songjia didn't want to implicate her family, and after being saved by him, she actually delivered herself to his doorstep. How unlucky could he be? He could only step out and save her once again, temporarily letting her suffer for a while before letting her go. This way, Yincheng wouldn't think about her anymore. Yincheng laughed silently in his heart when he saw Qin Wentian ordering Songjia. It seemed like Songjia's fate wouldn't be good after falling into his hands. Such a beauty. How could Qin Wentian spare her? When Shangyu saw Qin Wentian acting, she initially thought that he was an extraordinary character. She didn't expect him to be so vulgar, causing her to be extremely disappointed. After Yang Ting retreated, Yincheng glanced at Qin Wentian once more, allowing him to continue sitting there. After which he turned to the crowd and spoke, "Let's continue. Who else has a treasure?" As the sound of his voice faded, someone walked out from the crowd. This person was clad in black and his features couldn't be seen clearly. Naturally, no one felt surprised. After all, in the treasure-seizing assembly, this was an extremely common occurrence. "What do you have?" someone asked. With a wave of his hand, a furnace appeared in the air. Within the furnace, an incomparably violent heat emanated from it, as though flames were about to rush out from the furnace. "I want 1,000 fourth-layer yuan meteor stones." The masked man spoke. Momentarily, an old man in the crowd spoke, "I want it." However, in the direction of the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan, a young man's eyes flashed as he stared at the furnace. "This item is mine." The eyes of the old man in the crowd stiffened as he glanced at the young man from the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan. Upon knowing the identity of the young man, his expression couldn't help but stiffen as he replied, "Forget it. Bring it over." The young man from the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan spoke. The experts of the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan were proficient in fire-attributed energy. They were able to devour heavenly flames to nourish their bloodline, strengthening their Golden Fire bloodline. This was an innate ability unique to them. Hence, they naturally wouldn't miss out on this opportunity. After the black-robed man completed the transaction, his silhouette flickered as he blended into the crowd and departed. After that, more and more people took out their treasures. Some of them were snatched away by those seated in the pavilions, while others were obtained by those hidden in the crowd. There was even a dispute that occurred. Qin Wentian quietly watched on. Behind him, Song Jia was massaging his back, appearing extremely satisfied. However, he didn't know that Song Jia was currently gritting her teeth, silently cursing him in her heart. The treasure-seizing assembly of the Heavenly Mountain is truly extraordinary. The treasures here are all extraordinary. Qin Wentian murmured. After obtaining Song Jia, he hadn't acted again. He didn't encounter any treasures that could move his heart. At this moment, an old man clad in black robes walked out. Only his face could be seen, and it was obvious that he was very old. Qin Wentian swept his gaze over. He could tell that this old man's cultivation base was extraordinary. This old man didn't waste any words and directly took out an item. This item was a 3 feet long golden brush. The instant it was taken out, a powerful spatial fluctuation could be felt, causing the eyes of many to gleam with sharpness. This spatial brush was obtained by this old man under a stroke of good fortune. "I need a peak-tier celestial phenomenon cultivation art. Can anyone take it out?" The old man spoke, his words causing the hearts of the crowd to tremble. This old man wanted a cultivation art, and an extraordinary one at that. "I want it." In the pavilion, a person from a major power stated, "If this brush landed in the hands of a divine inscriptionist, even if that divine inscriptionist wasn't proficient in spatial energy, as long as he was proficient in spatial inscriptions, he would be able to inscribe a life-saving treasure." Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a bright light. This item was precisely what he needed. He had to obtain it no matter what. "I want it too." Another person interjected. "I, Yincheng, am interested as well." Yincheng's lips curled up in a cold smile. This brush was definitely an extremely rare treasure. Even if the price the other party wanted was extremely high, it was still worth it. The countenances of the crowd sank. They didn't expect that this item would cause such a commotion. "This brush is mine." A clear voice rang out, causing the gazes of the crowd to freeze as they landed on the beautiful woman in the pavilion beside Yin Cheng. Shang Yu stared at the spatial brush, her beautiful eyes flashing with a bright light. This treasure, she wanted it. Chapter 479. So many people are fighting for it, but Princess Yu is determined to get it. As the sound of Shang Yu's voice faded, the entire space fell silent. Everyone was staring at the spatial brush in the hands of the old man. The mandate of space had always been a type of extremely powerful energy. Not only that, if one's cultivation was high enough, they would even be able to perform spatial teleportation. This spatial brush contained the mandate of space, and could be used by experts who cultivated the mandate of space to increase their attacking prowess. However, it had another terrifying use. If this spatial brush was obtained by a grandmaster, who could inscribe spatial displacement divine inscriptions, they would be able to use it to inscribe divine inscription scrolls. At critical moments, it could be used to save one's life, just like the treasure Qin Zheng had back then. Hence, the appearance of the spatial brush caused many experts to vie for it. Yin Cheng, Princess Yu, and the rest all came from powerful powers. Naturally, they would be able to find a powerful grandmaster. Hence, the significance of this spatial brush to them was extraordinary. In the future, they would be able to inscribe divine inscription scrolls endlessly, and they could even sell it to others to earn more resources. This spatial brush is of little value to many, but to those who can find a grandmaster to help them, it's a treasure. The hearts of the spectators mused. Naturally, if it was obtained by a grandmaster who could inscribe divine inscriptions, the value of this spatial brush would definitely be different. Qin Wentian was precisely the type of person they were thinking of. Closing his eyes, Qin Wentian sank into silence as he rummaged through his memories. An instant later, he found what he was looking for. It was recorded in an ancient scroll regarding how to inscribe divine inscription scrolls. However, the difficulty level was extremely high. The grandmaster who inscribed the spatial brush had to be proficient in the mandate of space. But now that he had this spatial brush, it would be much easier. When he thought of this, he opened his eyes again, and a sharp light flashed in them. "Songjia, help me buy some things that I need." Qin Wentian transmitted his voice to Songjia, who was standing behind him. After which, he turned around and passed an interspatial ring to her. Songjia's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. Hearing Qin Wentian's voice resounding in her mind, she silently cursed in her heart that this fellow was really treating her like a slave and ordering her around. However, she still nodded her head and left. She must have followed Qin Wentian's instructions, and went to find the items that Qin Wentian needed. The trading area of the Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly was filled with mountains and ancient paths. At this moment, Yin Cheng smiled and spoke. "Since the princess wants this item, I naturally won't compete with you for it. I will withdraw." After Yin Cheng expressed his stance, the young man beside him also nodded and said, "If the princess is willing, then this item naturally belongs to the princess. I will also withdraw." Shang Yu was the princess of the King Manor. In addition to her outstanding talent, with a cultivation base at the 4th level of Heavenly Dipper, these people from the major powers might still compete with each other for this item. But for the princess, they wouldn't compete. Even if this item was extraordinary, if they competed, they would undoubtedly offend the princess of the King Manor. Not only that, the other major powers would definitely target them as well. Since the princess wants this brush, just take it out. The princess will naturally bestow the cultivation art to you. Yin Cheng stared at the black-robed old man as he spoke. "I need to ask the princess what cultivation art this is." The black-robed old man lowered his voice as he stared at Shang Yu. Shang Yu stared at him as her lips moved slightly. Her voice directly rang out in the ears of the black-robed old man. The old man's countenance didn't change as he replied in a low voice. "This cultivation art indeed satisfies this old man's requirements. In that case, let's trade." Shang Yu faintly spoke. "Wait a minute." At this moment, another voice drifted over. Among the crowd, there was another old man. This old man is also interested in this spatial brush. This old man was clad in a long green robe, appearing extremely casual. He exuded an extraordinary aura. Grandmaster Qiu. Shang Yu stared at the green-robed old man as a strange expression appeared on her face. This old man was a peak tier 4th ranked grandmaster with a cultivation base at the peak of the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. If he really wanted to compete with Shang Yu might not be able to win against him. Princess, this old man is indeed in need of this item. Grandmaster Qiu stared at Shang Yu as he indifferently stated. Grandmaster Qiu's attainments in divine inscriptions are extraordinary. I naturally know that. If I can obtain this brush, I will invite Grandmaster Qiu to my manor. How about it? The princess spoke to Grandmaster Qiu, implying that she would join forces with him to forge the brush. This caused Grandmaster Qiu's eyes to brighten as he smiled and clasped his hands. Since the princess is so kind, I will naturally withdraw. Many thanks, Grandmaster Qiu. Shang Yu lightly nodded. Her countenance didn't fluctuate too much. Qin Wentian stared at Shang Yu, and upon seeing the calmness in her eyes, he silently mused that Shang Yu didn't really view Grandmaster Qiu as a worthy opponent. Hee, it seems like this brush belongs to the princess. Yincheng laughed. It was as though this spatial brush was already in Shang Yu's possession. Shang Yu's countenance was calm as she stared ahead. It was rare for her to encounter a treasure she wanted. There was naturally no one who would compete with her. I Qin also want this treasure. At this moment, a voice that shouldn't have appeared rang out, causing the gazes of the crowd to turn over in the direction of the voice. Once again, they saw the white-robed young man. The young man who claimed to be surnamed Qin was as calm as ever. He turned his gaze onto the black-robed old man. He actually wanted to compete with the princess for the spatial brush? Shang Yu frowned as a look of unhappiness flashed past her eyes. She glanced in the direction of Qin Wentian as she asked, "What cultivation art do you want to use to exchange for this treasure?" The black-robed old man similarly stared at Qin Wentian. If Qin Wentian wanted to trade for this treasure, he would first have to provide a cultivation art that the black-robed old man was satisfied with. Only then would he have the qualifications to compete. The Grand Shang Empire is located right next to Grand Xia. The ancient empire has 9 ultimate arts, including the Great Solar Universe art. If one cultivates it, one would be able to manifest the Great Solar Bloodline, causing one's body to be akin to magma. When the Great Solar Bloodline erupts forth, anyone who gets close to it would be incinerated. Is this cultivation art sufficient? Qin Wentian transmitted his voice to the black-robed old man. Momentarily, the eyes of the black-robed old man gleamed with sharpness. He naturally knew about Grand Xia. The cultivation art offered by this young man was actually one of the ultimate arts of Grand Xia. The value of this cultivation art was even greater compared to the cultivation art Shang Yu spoke of. It definitely surpassed the value of the spatial brush in his hands. However, when trading treasures, the most important thing was to obtain what each party needed. Qin Wentian didn't care about this cultivation art. And as for the spatial brush, it wouldn't be of much use to him. Hence, he was able to agree to the conditions of the transaction. However, the black-robed old man didn't dare to directly trade with Qin Wentian and reject Shang Yu's proposal. After all, he had already agreed earlier that Shang Yu's cultivation art was suitable for him. The eyes of the black-robed old man flickered as he spoke. This cultivation art is also suitable. As the sound of his voice faded, the gazes of the crowd froze. In that case, it meant that they were going to compete for the treasure. "Sir, can you give me some face?" At this moment, Yincheng stared at Qin Wentian as he spoke. His eyes flickered with a sinister light. It was rare for Princess Shang Yu to have a treasure that even he had to give up on. Yet this young man actually dared to compete for it? What does the treasure-seizing assembly have to do with face? Qin Wentian glanced at Yincheng as he casually spoke. Instantly, the sinister light in Yincheng's eyes flickered with unmasked coldness. "This treasure isn't something you can obtain." Another person spoke. This person was from the Heaven-Shocking Sword sect, and was seated beside Yang Ting, who had just been defeated by Qin Wentian. Do you know that this pavilion isn't a place where just anyone can sit? We didn't make things difficult for you, but you better not know when to retreat. Another person from the Wind Rock aristocrat clan directly threatened. Since I'm here to seize the treasure, how can your threats scare me away? Qin Wentian snorted as he continued. If you guys want to decide who will be the one seizing the treasure, why do you need to invite others here to present their treasures? Since this is the treasure-seizing assembly, everyone can seize the treasure. The crowd didn't expect Qin Wentian to be so unappreciative, not knowing when to retreat. The disciples from the major powers all had cold smiles on their faces as they stared at Qin Wentian with pity. Could this young man be a newborn calf? How could he be so ignorant? Although it was true that everyone could seize the treasure in the treasure-seizing assembly, it also depended on who the person was. The treasure that the princess wanted was not something that he could covet. Indeed, everyone can seize the treasure in the treasure-seizing assembly. Shangyu spoke after hearing Qin Wentian's words. Her gaze was fixed in Qin Wentian's direction as a sharp light flashed in her beautiful eyes. At this moment, her beautiful countenance was filled with a domineering sharpness, causing others to not dare to look directly at her. Princess, why don't you allow me to represent you in the treasure-seizing battle? If he is defeated by me, he wouldn't have the qualifications to fight against the princess. At this moment, another person spoke up, wanting to represent Shangyu. Princess, your strength is stronger than mine. How about I represent you in this battle? What do you think? Someone from the Golden Fire aristocrat clan spoke. You guys discussed this clearly. I will only fight against one of you. Qin Wentian spoke, his words causing the gazes of the crowd to be filled with interest. Although this person's strength wasn't ordinary and was able to defeat Yang Ting with ease, Yang Ting's strength was probably the weakest among the geniuses here. Did he think that he had the qualifications to be arrogant just because he defeated Yang Ting? Shangyu wasn't just born into a beautiful family. Her talent and strength were in no way inferior to her beauty. As for the young men around Shangyu, they were all geniuses from the various major powers. What did Qin Wentian count for? What's your cultivation base like? Shangyu stared at Qin Wentian as she asked. 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. Qin Wentian replied. I disdain to bully you. Shangyu calmly replied after hearing his words. It wasn't that she looked down on Qin Wentian's strength, but rather, she was too clear about her own strength. She was the princess of a king manor, a member of the royal clan. She possessed the power of a bloodline, and the innate techniques she cultivated were all top-notch. Not only that, the mandates she comprehended were also extremely powerful. There were only a few people on the same level as her, who could be compared to her. In terms of combat prowess, there were only a few who could be her match. Even defeating ordinary 5th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns was a piece of cake for her. Qin Wentian's cultivation base was only at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. She was confident that she could easily suppress him. You better give up on this treasure. Shangyu pointed her finger at the spatial brush in the hands of the black-robed old man. She felt that it was beneath her to make a move against Qin Wentian. Hence, she once again advised Qin Wentian to give up on this treasure. Chapter 480. The surrounding spectators all had expressions of interest on their faces. This white-robed young man was truly an interesting character. The first time he appeared, he snatched Song Jiao away, causing Yin Cheng to be somewhat unhappy. However, Song Jiao was intentionally humiliated by Yin Cheng, treating her as an item to be traded. Although Yin Cheng was unhappy that Qin Wentian snatched her away, he wouldn't really do anything to him. However, things were different now. The treasure Shangyu wanted, yet Qin Wentian actually dared to compete for it. Could it be that Qin Wentian didn't know that the appearance of Shangyu here would cause these people from the various sects and clans to hate the fact that they didn't have a chance to display their strength? At this moment, Qin Wentian jumping out was akin to striking a stone with an egg. What confidence did he have to contend against Shangyu? Qin Wentian's thoughts naturally weren't something they could understand. When adventuring in the outside world, how could one not offend experts? Qin Wentian had long made his preparations. Now that he had no more worries, what he needed now was to increase his trump cards and increase his survivability. The spatial brush before him could achieve his goal. How could Qin Wentian give it up? I, Qin Wentian, want this brush for sure. As the sound of Shang Yu's voice faded, Qin Wentian decisively replied. In an instant, the space in the surroundings froze as many people stood up. A gust of wind gusted over from the precipice, buffeting the bodies of the geniuses, causing the long robes of those in the pavilions to flutter. Their gazes were all fixated on Qin Wentian's location as a faint pressure gushed over to him. This brush, he wanted it for sure? What an arrogant tone. Shang Yu didn't want to bully him. To them, it was only natural. But what qualifications did Qin Wentian have to do so? Princess, let me retrieve the brush for you. Beside Shang Yu, a middle-aged man spoke in a low voice as he bowed to her. Since he was Shang Yu's subordinate, there was no difference between Shang Yu seizing the treasure and him seizing the treasure. At this moment, he was naturally willing to do it for her. If you make a move, what's the difference between it and me making a move? Others will say that there's no one in my mansion. Shang Yu coldly stated. Evidently, Qin Wentian's arrogant attitude caused her to be extremely unhappy. However, the middle-aged man beside her had a cultivation base at the peak of the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper, and was one of her guards. She, Shang Yu, wanted a 5th level Heavenly Dipper sovereign to compete with a 3rd level Heavenly Dipper sovereign? Wasn't this a joke? My cultivation base is at the 4th level of Yuanfu. None of the 4th level Yuanfu cultivators here would dare to say that they can defeat me. Shang Yu looked at Qin Wentian and said slowly, I've said it before, I don't want to bully you. But since you don't know what's good for you then, who is willing to fight for me? After Shang Yu finished speaking, several figures flashed out and instantly descended in the central area. Those who came out were all geniuses at the 4th level of Heavenly Dipper. They stared at Shang Yu as they smiled. I'm willing to do it for you. As for Qin Wentian, they didn't care too much about him. Against Yang Ting, they could easily suppress him with no suspense. If not, they wouldn't have stepped out in the first place. Shang Yu's beautiful eyes stared at these silhouettes. Finally, her gaze landed on a young man. This young man had a golden flame insignia imprinted on his robes, indicating that he was a genius from the Golden Fire aristocrat clan. His attacks were extremely tyrannical and ordinary 4th level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns wouldn't be his opponent. As for 3rd level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns, they would die without a doubt if they were to be incinerated by his golden flames. Jinzhan, bring me along. Shang Yu stared at the genius from the Golden Fire aristocrat clan as she spoke. The corner of Jinzhan's mouth curled up into a confident smile, as if he had already obtained victory. The others all retreated. Since the princess had already made her choice, there was nothing they could do. They could only allow Jinzhan to benefit from it. If they fought for the princess, they would definitely win her favor. Jinzhan's gaze slowly shifted over, landing on Qin Wentian. The smile on his face turned into one of mockery, filled with disdain. This person was truly courting death. Since this was the case, Qin Wentian would grant him his wish. Didn't you want to seize the treasure? Get the hell out here. Jinzhan spat out. However, he only saw Qin Wentian casually glancing at him as he replied, Wait a moment. Jinzhan frowned as a mocking expression appeared on his face. You don't dare to fight? A moment is fine. Qin Wentian faintly spoke, yet his words caused a commotion in the crowd. Could it be that this white-robed young man was truly afraid to fight? I don't have the time to play with you. As the sound of Jinzhan's voice rang out, the power of his bloodline gushed forth from his body. An intense heat flowed through his body. He stretched out his hand, and a ball of golden flames appeared in his palm. Instantly, the surrounding space seemed to distort under the heat of the golden flames, fluctuating erratically. Jinzhan stepped out with a mocking smile on his face as he walked towards Qin Wentian's pavilion. Many people felt sympathy for Qin Wentian. In this battle, in order to please the princess, Jinzhan wouldn't show any mercy to Qin Wentian. At this moment, Song Jia bypassed the crowd and arrived at the pavilion beside Qin Wentian. Upon seeing Jinzhan walking over, her countenance couldn't help but stiffen. Have you settled the matter? Qin Wentian acted as though he didn't see Jinzhan as he asked Song Jia. The reason why he called for Song Jia to wait was because he knew that Song Jia had returned. I found quite a few. Song Jia passed the interspatial ring over to Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to smile and nod his head as he kept the interspatial ring. At the same time, he placed Little Rascal on Song Jia's back as he stated, "Bring this little rascal out for a stroll." However, at the same time, a voice rang out in Song Jia's ears. "After today, Yincheng will gradually forget about you. You should return to your clan. If you are really worried about Yincheng's revenge, you can just ask your clan to migrate. My pet will naturally escort you out of the city." Song Jia's countenance stiffened as her beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian. "Don't worry, given Little Rascal's speed, even a 5th-level Heavenly Dipper Sovereign might not be able to catch up to it." Qin Wentian continued. Song Jia bit her lips. She knew that Qin Wentian had offended Yincheng because he wanted to help her. "Why?" Song Jia asked in a low voice. "Why are you still not going?" Qin Wentian waved his palms as Song Jia felt an immense force pushing her body through the air. The snow-white puppy leapt onto her shoulder, and at the same time, she saw Qin Wentian taking out a flask of wine as he gulped down a mouthful. It was as though he was replying to her words. There was no other reason. It was all because of the wine in the cellar. It was only when Song Jia met up with her father and found her family members together that the steward of the Song family in Luoyang City found out that the white-clothed young man had taken away a cellar full of good wine that day, but he had brought back an unharmed Song Jia. Song Jia only felt that Little Rascal on her shoulder was actually dragging her along as it soared through the air. However, the person standing at the edge of the cliff didn't have the time to notice her, because at this moment, Jin Zhan had already arrived not far away from Qin Wentian. The terrifying golden flames emanating from him were sufficient to incinerate a human into ashes. After Qin Wentian gulped down a mouthful of wine, he stood up and spat out a mouthful of it towards the golden flames. Momentarily, the golden flames of the wine collided with the golden flames, causing the flames to soar up into the skies. The crowd only saw a smile on the face of the white-robed young man. The wine gourd was still in his hands as he stepped out. With a single step, the heavens and earth seemed to sink as a terrifying killing intent gushed forth, causing the people in the air to clearly feel the heaviness of the atmosphere. However, the one who felt the pressure even heavier was none other than Jin Zhan. This step of Qin Wentian's was akin to the killing intent of the heavens and earth. It was as though a sword intent had penetrated through his body, gushing into his astral nova. Boom! The power of the golden fire bloodline erupted forth. Jin Zhan's entire body was bathed in flames, resembling a fiery god of war. His astral nova manifested, resembling a golden flame lotus. With a wave of his palms, numerous golden flames danced in the air as they shot towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian stepped out, and as the second step landed, Jin Zhan groaned in agony. An even more powerful sword strike penetrated through his body, penetrating through his astral nova, causing cracks to appear on the surface of the golden flame lotus. Jin Zhan's countenance turned pale. The confidence and disdain on his face had completely vanished. In fact, there was even a hint of panic in his heart. No matter what, Jin Zhan was a famous character in the Xianqing city, a genius from the Golden Fire aristocrat clan. This battle was for the sake of the princess of the Xianqing clan. If he failed, although the princess wouldn't say anything, she would definitely bear a grudge in her heart. Just these 2 steps had completely shattered his self-confidence, causing him to lose the will to win. Jin Zhan's astral nova erupted forth. Both of his palms folded incantations as he abruptly blasted out. Instantly, a powerful will of mandates gushed forth, causing the entire space to be ignited. The golden flame lotus was even sharper than swords and sabers, revolving rapidly as it flew towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's body seemed to be on the verge of being ignited. However, Qin Wentian's countenance didn't change at all. He took his third step. 7 Annihilation Swordplay, 1 step, 1 kill, 1 thought, 1 kill. At the instant the third strike landed, the golden flame lotus directly exploded in the air, transforming into resplendent sparks. On Qin Wentian's body, the will of the mandate of swords gushed forth from his king sword astral nova, causing cracks to appear on Jin Zhan's astral nova, as it was penetrated by the mandate of swords. Jin Zhan groaned in agony as blood seeped out from the corners of his mouth, his countenance turning pale. This mouthful of blood caused the gazes of countless people to stiffen, as expressions of shock and terror appeared on their faces as they stared at the white-robed young man. Jin Zhan was injured? The white-robed young man hadn't even made his move yet. He had only taken 3 steps forwards. 1 step, 1 kill. The might of each step was stronger than the one before. Far away in the air, Song Jia turned her head and stared in the direction of the white-robed young man. She could feel the sword intent emanating from that direction, and at the same time, saw Jin Zhan coughing out blood. Her heart violently pounded as her beautiful eyes turned sluggish as she stared at the white-robed young man. So it's him. Only now did Song Jia know that the person who sent Yin Cheng to capture her back then was none other than Qin Wentian. So it turned out that the white-robed young man who seemed to be incomparably powerful in her eyes had always been by her side. It was as though he didn't care about anything at all. The wind gusted by, fluttering Song Jia's long hair. She cast one last glance at the white-robed young man before turning away. A smile could be seen in her eyes, yet her eyes were slightly moist. Chapter 481. Song Jia departed, leaving with tears in her eyes. Although there were many injustices in the world, there were still some kind-hearted people. Nobody paid attention to Song Jia's departure. At this moment, the gazes of the crowd were all focused on Qin Wentian and Jin Zhan. As the white-robed young man took 3 steps forward, the pressure in the air was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. However, this wasn't sufficient to cause them to be startled. What shocked them was that when the 3rd step landed, Jin Zhan actually coughed out a mouthful of blood. The Golden Fire Aristocrat clan was one of the 3 great clans in Xianqing City. Although Jin Zhan wasn't the most talented disciple in the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan, he could still be considered an extraordinary character with outstanding talent and combat prowess. How could ordinary 4th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns be his opponent, let alone 3rd-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns? However, Qin Wentian didn't even need to make a move to deal with him. Not only that, the aura radiating from Qin Wentian truly indicated that he was at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper. Suppression. This wasn't a battle on the same level. Jin Zhan paled. At this moment, he had a feeling that the gazes of the entire world were on him, watching him being humiliated. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, Jin Zhan howled in rage, as though he was still unwilling to give up. But just as his aura surged forth, Qin Wentian's right foot stomped down once more. In that instant, Jin Zhan felt a boundless sword intent cascading down from the air above him. That formless sword intent transformed into a true killing intent that penetrated through his body, directly piercing into him. Chi. This time around, Jin Zhan's aura was completely shattered. He violently coughed out a mouthful of blood as the golden flames around him were completely shattered. Even his astral nova seemed to be on the verge of cracking. There's even the will of the mandate of sword infused within. How powerful! Jin Zhan's heart trembled. Right now, his aura fluctuated wildly as he found it hard to breathe. Qin Wentian was already not far away from him. Yet Qin Wentian was still standing there as though nothing had happened, quietly staring at him. This caused Jin Zhan to feel an intense sense of humiliation. At this moment, a gust of wind gusted by. Jin Zhan only felt Qin Wentian's silhouette drifting past him, directly disregarding him. Qin Wentian stopped close to the black-robed old man, and turned around to look at Shangyu. This treasure belongs to me now. Qin Wentian had won the battle for the treasure, so the space pen naturally belonged to Qin Wentian. The black-robed old man nodded his head slightly. He felt lucky that Qin Wentian had won the battle for the treasure. The cultivation technique that Qin Wentian had provided was even more tempting to him. However, he did not dare to offend Countess Shangyu, which was why he had no other choice. Wait! As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, Yin Cheng interjected. He stared at Qin Wentian as a sinister light flashed in his eyes. This brat is truly treacherous. He actually concealed his cultivation base, saying that he's at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper, using such a deceitful method to seize the treasure. I'm afraid this battle doesn't count. The eyes of the spectators lit up. Yin Cheng's personality was extremely crafty, and he loved to use schemes and plots. His words were undoubtedly a reminder to the crowd. That's right, this brat's cultivation base definitely isn't at the third level of Heavenly Dipper. To think that the princess would be deceived by him. This brat is so sinister he deserves death. The various geniuses standing at the side of the cliff all spoke, berating Qin Wentian. From their words, it was as though Qin Wentian was an unpardonable sinner. Only death would suffice to vent their anger. Upon seeing such a scene, Qin Wentian didn't feel strange at all. He was as calm as ever. In the treasure-seizing assembly of the Heavenly Mountain, if one was willing to pay an equal price, the outcome would be decided by battle. The stronger one would obtain the treasure. Right now, although he had defeated Jin Zhan, it only meant that he was stronger than Jin Zhan. Yet these people still believed that with their strength, they could easily crush him, Qin Wentian. Hence, how could he be willing to disappoint the princess? No matter what, he wouldn't allow Qin Wentian to obtain the treasure so easily. Yes, your mandate of swords is so powerful, you must have concealed your cultivation base. Jin Zhan seemed to have found a straw to clutch at. He turned his head, his eyes gleaming with sharpness as he stared at Qin Wentian. So what if I concealed my cultivation base? Who was the victor in the treasure-seizing battle? Qin Wentian didn't deny it. He swept his gaze over to the crowd as he faintly spoke. Yin Cheng's lips curled into a cold smile. Seems like you have admitted it yourself. Since this is the case, the princess must have been deceived by you. That's why she sent Jin Zhan to fight in her stead. If not, given the princess's strength, how could you contend against her? Is that so? Qin Wentian turned his gaze onto Shangyu as he spoke. I, Qin, have already said that I will only fight a single battle. I will keep my word. As the sound of his voice faded, a terrifying sharpness gleamed in Qin Wentian's eyes, sweeping over the crowd as it pierced towards Yin Cheng. Yin Cheng's lips curled into a cold smile. He slammed his palm onto the chair he was sitting on and instantly, several silhouettes dashed out from his side, all of them lunging towards Qin Wentian. Seems like you don't place my words in your eyes at all. Qin Wentian icily spoke. As he spoke, a resplendent light erupted forth from the center of his brows. Yin Cheng, who was smiling, abruptly felt his mind shuddering violently. When he stared into Qin Wentian's eyes, he felt as though he had fallen into an endless abyss of darkness. It was as though countless demons were slaughtering their way into his mind. Do you want to die? A voice rang out in his mind, causing Yin Cheng to scream in agony. Those experts who were rushing towards Qin Wentian turned their heads only to see Yin Cheng clutching his head with both his hands, as though he was in extreme pain. He roared, "Come back!" Those experts exchanged glances before turning their gazes onto Qin Wentian. One of the experts at the peak of the fourth level of Heavenly Dipper was still unwilling to give up. He stepped out, causing the earth to tremble. Bang! Astral light erupted as the stars shifted. The spectators only saw a beam of blood-red light flashing past. Qin Wentian returned to his original location, as though he had never moved at all. That expert who stepped towards Qin Wentian had fresh blood dripping from his throat. His hands clutched his throat as an expression of unwillingness flashed in his eyes. He died just like that. A light sound rang out as that expert collapsed onto the ground. The spectators in the surroundings all had looks of shock on their faces as they stared at the white-robed young man. This young man actually used a killing move. Not only that, his strength was so terrifying. Even fourth-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns weren't his opponent. Even if Shangyu was the one fighting, she wouldn't have the confidence to defeat this young man. Revealing your killing intent so many times, do you really think I, Qin, am easy to bully? Qin Wentian coldly snorted. Instantly, a terrifying sword pierced through Yin Cheng's head. Yin Cheng screamed in agony as he clutched his head with both his hands, as an expression of extreme agony appeared on his face, causing the spectators to be extremely shocked. What methods did this young man use exactly? Could it be that he was proficient in spiritual-type attacks? To think that he could actually cause Yin Cheng to be in such a miserable state. Yin Cheng's subordinates retreated to his side, yet their gazes were still fixed on Qin Wentian. Humph. Qin Wentian coldly snorted, sparing Yin Cheng. Only now did Yin Cheng regain his senses. That sinister countenance of his had already transformed into a sinister one as he stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. However, Qin Wentian shifted his gaze over, staring at Shangyu as he spoke. Can't afford to lose? Shangyu stared at the white-robed young man in front of her. At this moment, she naturally understood that she had misjudged him. If this young man didn't conceal his cultivation base, he would definitely be a terrifying demon-level character, comparable to the heaven chosen of the various great clans or sections. Although Yin Cheng's cultivation base was slightly lower, only at the 3rd level of Heavenly Dipper, his talent was already extremely high. After all, Yin Cheng was extremely young, yet when facing against this young man, he was easily killed. Since I've lost, this treasure shall be yours. Shangyu coldly spoke, her words causing the spectators to draw in a breath of cold air. Princess Shangyu came to the Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly to compete against this white-robed young man. Yet she actually lost. No matter how this battle progressed, the final victor belonged to the white-robed young man, who had yet to display his outstanding talent in Xianqing City. He appeared to be only around 25 years of age. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over, staring at the black-robed old man. He took out an ancient scroll and passed it over to the black-robed old man. The cultivation art is recorded within. Please take a look. The black-robed old man nodded and received the cultivation art. His will instantly sank into it, and an instant later, his eyes gleamed with sharpness as he passed the spatial brush to Qin Wentian. After which, his silhouette flickered as he directly departed this place. In the Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly, many of those who presented their treasures would appear with their faces covered. After obtaining the item they wanted, they would immediately flee to avoid any mishaps. After all, it wasn't uncommon for people to kill others for treasures. After Qin Wentian received the spatial brush, he directly kept it away. This caused Shangyu to stare at him with a look of reluctance in her eyes. She then spoke again. This spatial brush has already been obtained by you. Now, are you willing to transfer it to me? Whatever price you want, feel free to state it. The spectators were all taken aback. They didn't expect Princess Shangyu to be so stubborn, still wanting to obtain the spatial brush. Even if Qin Wentian agreed to the exchange, he would definitely demand an exorbitant price. At the very least, the price would be higher than the cultivation art he took out. Not exchanging. Qin Wentian straightforwardly replied, his words causing Shangyu's countenance to stiffen. She then spoke again. Why don't you reconsider? I Qin don't wish to waste my breath. Qin Wentian spoke. To him, the spatial brush was extremely useful. How could he exchange it with Shangyu? Shangyu, as the princess of the Xianqing Manor, was an extremely rare beauty. In addition to her outstanding talent, who wouldn't show her some respect? There had never been anyone who rejected her in such a manner before. Biting her lips, Shangyu stared at Qin Wentian as hatred filled her heart. This person really didn't know what was good for him. After Qin Wentian obtained the spatial brush, he didn't leave. Under the bewildered gazes of the spectators, he returned to the pavilion and casually sat there, as though nothing had happened at all. Or maybe he didn't place the matter earlier in his heart. The coldness in Yin Cheng's eyes grew even more intense. In the depths of his eyes, killing intent could be seen flickering. Let's continue. Yin Cheng's state of mind was also extraordinary. At this moment he was actually able to stabilize his state of mind. The Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly had yet to end. The reason why Qin Wentian didn't leave was because he wanted to see if there were any other treasures he could obtain. After all, he had never thought that he would be able to obtain the spatial brush earlier. Grand Shang Empire had an abundance of resources. Its level was even higher compared to Grand Xia. The Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly was the largest trading event ever held in Xianqing City. Maybe there might even be some treasures he wanted. Chapter 482. In the following treasure seizing assembly, several other treasures appeared. However, none of them could move Qin Wentian's heart. Hence, he didn't participate in the contest. He wasn't acting on impulse. He would only fight for treasures if he truly needed them. The Heavenly Mountain Treasure Seizing Assembly is held once every 6 months and lasts for 7 consecutive days. I shall stay here for a few more days. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice, after which, his silhouette flickered as he stepped into the crowd. Many people retreated, opening up a path for him. Yincheng stared at the departing back of Qin Wentian as a cold glint of light flashed in his eyes. He signaled to the guards beside him and immediately, 2 5th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns departed, as though they were in pursuit of Qin Wentian. Other than this, Qin Wentian could clearly sense that there were others staring at him. Most probably, although he had obtained the spatial brush, it still attracted the attention of others. Following the ancient pathway in the mountains, Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as he flew towards the depths of the Heavenly Mountain range. Behind him, there were several guards flying through the air, following closely behind him. However, Qin Wentian didn't seem to mind. Not long after, he found an extremely comfortable cave dwelling in the depths of the Heavenly Mountain range. Most probably, this cave was opened up by a stellar martial cultivator in the past. After entering, Qin Wentian wasn't in a hurry to cultivate. Instead, he was inscribing something on the ground. After a long time, he inclined his head and cast a glance outwards as a cold glint of light flickered in his eyes. How powerful was Qin Wentian's perception? He could naturally sense that other than the 2 guards following him, there were also a few others monitoring his movements. Among them, the most powerful one should be Grandmaster Qiu. This Grandmaster Qiu initially wanted to snatch the spatial brush, but because of Princess Xiangyu's words, he gave up. But most probably, he didn't expect that the spatial brush would eventually land in his hands, which was why he wanted to snatch it away. In addition, as the sky gradually darkened, more and more Wuxia flew into the mountains to find a place to rest. Obviously, they had the same idea as Qin Wentian. During the 7 days treasure seizing assembly, the people from the top powers would go to the place where the treasures were presented, while the others would also go to the stall set up by Wuxia to trade. Many cultivators wanted to find what they wanted, so naturally, they wouldn't leave so early. During these 7 days, it would always be very lively. If they missed this kind of treasure seizing assembly, they would have to wait for another half a year. On an ancient peak that was adjacent to Qin Wentian, Yincheng's silhouette appeared there. His gaze was cold and sinister, and beside him, there were several guards standing there. Is he still in the cave? Yincheng coldly asked. And after entering, he hasn't left. It isn't just us. Grandmaster Qiu is also keeping an eye on him, most likely because of the spatial brush. The guard replied. For such a minor matter, I don't wish to alarm my clan. It's just that the strength of this person is still unknown. There's no need for you all to be anxious. Grandmaster Qiu will naturally probe for us. Yincheng's eyes were ice-cold as he stared into the distance. Killing intent flickered in his eyes. That white-robed young man dared to humiliate him in front of so many people. No matter who he was, he had to kill him. Since Qin Wentian had decided to stay here, he naturally understood that there were hidden dangers lurking in the shadows. At this moment, he used his astral energy to illuminate the interior of the cave, sealing it. The perception of others wouldn't be able to enter, unless they directly broke through his astral energy barrier. Under the illumination of the astral energy, Qin Wentian took out several ancient scrolls. These ancient scrolls were all specially made for the purpose of inscribing divine inscriptions. These were precisely the items that Qin Wentian asked Songjia to help him find. With an intention of his will, Qin Wentian took out a spatial brush and unfurled one of the ancient scrolls. After which, he infused astral energy into the spatial brush as he started to inscribe divine inscriptions on the scroll. However, after a long period of inscribing, the ancient scrolls turned into scrap metal and were tossed to the side by Qin Wentian. How could it be so easy to inscribe a spatial scroll? Even though he was proficient in the art of inscribing divine inscriptions, he still failed time and time again. Luckily, Songjia was reliable and had helped him trade for quite a few ancient scrolls. This was the reason why he was able to keep on trying. Finally, after tens of failures, an ancient scroll that emanated an immense amount of spatial energy appeared before Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian stood beside the ancient scroll, clutching the spatial brush in his hands as a smile flickered in his eyes. Although the Great Solar Universe art is extremely valuable, I wouldn't lose anything by using it to trade. As for this spatial brush, leaving aside the fact that I can use it to inscribe life-saving treasures, even if I were to use it to trade, it would be sufficient to support my cultivation for a long period of time. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. It's just that right now, the distance I can inscribe divine inscriptions isn't too far. If I were to face enemies that are too strong, it would still be dangerous. Qin Wentian murmured in his heart, but he didn't dare to be careless. He kept the completed page of divine inscription and continued inscribing. The sky gradually brightened, and several silhouettes appeared in the mountain range, all of them preparing to head to the main peak to trade for treasures. However, Qin Wentian's cavern was still under surveillance. At this moment, a light sound rang out, as though something had shattered. Within the cavern, Qin Wentian sat cross-legged. Abruptly, his eyes snapped open as he stared into the distance, as a cold glint of light flickered in his eyes. Not far away from Qin Wentian's cavern, a silhouette floated in the air. This person was an old man, and his gaze was fixed on Qin Wentian's cavern as he smiled. "Little friend, do you mind coming out for a chat? Could it be that you don't know that it's rude to barge in when others are cultivating?" A voice drifted out from the cavern. The people in the surroundings all halted their steps as they stared at this scene with interest. The old man standing in the air was none other than a famous character in Xianqing City. He was a peak tier 4th ranked Grandmaster, Grandmaster Qiu. Why was he here at this moment? However, there were also those who knew of what happened yesterday. Seems like this Grandmaster Qiu couldn't endure it any longer. He must have wanted the spatial brush badly, but he gave it up because of the princess's might. But now that the brush was in the hands of Qin Wentian, how could he be willing to give it up? "Hee, I have something to discuss with little friend, I hope you don't mind." Grandmaster Qiu faintly spoke. After a moment of silence, a single word abruptly rang out: "Scram." Grandmaster Qiu's countenance stiffened. Not only him, the people in the surroundings were all stunned when they heard the word scram. Who was this person in the cavern? How dare he tell Grandmaster Qiu to scram? A cold light flickered in Grandmaster Qiu's eyes. No matter what, he was a famous character. Yet he was actually told to scram by a junior. Stepping out, Grandmaster Qiu directly walked towards the cavern where Qin Wentian was at. He initially wanted to barter with Qin Wentian, but seeing how impolite Qin Wentian was, there was no need for him to waste any more time here. Instantly, Grandmaster Qiu's steps landed outside the cavern where Qin Wentian was at. His perception swept out, probing the interior of the cavern. When he saw the divine inscriptions inscribed on the ground, a cold smile appeared on his face. Playing around with divine inscriptions in front of him? This person was truly too foolish. Stepping into the cavern with no hesitation, Grandmaster Qiu slammed his palm downwards, directly blasting a certain location. Instantly, the runic inscriptions flashed as a lacerating force directly tore through the area. Grandmaster Qiu advanced step by step, his feet trembling as he destroyed the runic inscriptions. His gaze was fixed on Qin Wentian as he spoke. "Junior, you are too arrogant. You want to trap this old man with just these runic inscriptions?" Qin Wentian stared at Grandmaster Qiu as a sinister smile appeared on his face. This caused Grandmaster Qiu to furrow his brows, only to see Qin Wentian stomping his foot on the ground. Instantly, the divine inscriptions that Grandmaster Qiu had destroyed shattered layer by layer, directly dissipating into nothingness. After which, numerous divine inscriptions that had been concealed in the cavern suddenly erupted forth. Grandmaster Qiu's countenance stiffened as he lowered his head and stared at the ground. These are overlapping divine inscriptions. Inclining his head, Grandmaster Qiu stared at Qin Wentian. As he spoke, his body directly soared up into the air as he lifted his palms, aiming for the cavern above him. "Do you think you can escape?" Qin Wentian laughed. Stepping out, Boundless Sword might soared up into the skies, instantly burying the entire cavern. This Grandmaster Qiu was referred to as a Grandmaster by others. Qin Wentian could naturally guess that this Grandmaster Qiu was proficient in divine inscriptions. Knowing that Grandmaster Qiu was spying on him, how could he not take precautions? Right now, given Qin Wentian's attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions, it wasn't a problem for him to kill a 5th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereign. In fact, even if it was just based on combat prowess, Qin Wentian wouldn't even care about his opponent. In the blink of an eye, Grandmaster Qiu disappeared forever. The crowd outside could only feel a monstrous amount of sword might permeating the atmosphere. Their perception was blocked outside. After that, there was no more movement. Grandmaster Qiu didn't come out again. This caused discussions to break out. Grandmaster Qiu had fallen? From afar, Yin Cheng's guards exchanged mutual glances as expressions of shock could be seen on their faces. No wonder this white-robed young man didn't hesitate to offend Princess Shangyu to seize the spatial brush. He was actually proficient in the Tao of divine inscriptions, and his attainments weren't any weaker compared to Grandmaster Qiu. If not, how could Grandmaster Qiu not return alive? Go back and report this. One of the guards spoke. After which, the person in front of him nodded as his silhouette flickered, soaring through the air. In the treasure-seizing assembly, on the cliff at the waist of the mountain where Qin Wentian was at yesterday, disciples from the various major powers arrived once again. Yin Cheng's countenance turned cold when he heard the voice transmission from the person beside him. It was actually a divine inscriptionist grandmaster. Not only Yin Cheng, Shangyu also received the report from the person beside her. She naturally knew of Qin Wentian's intentions in seizing the spatial brush. Keep an eye on him, don't let him leave. Shangyu and Yin Cheng both issued the same command. Momentarily, the silhouettes of several people flickered as they left the area, heading towards the cavern where Qin Wentian was at. Qin Wentian still hadn't left the cavern, he was still sitting cross-legged in cultivation. But at this moment, his brows were furrowed as he noticed that there were more and more people staring at him from the surrounding mountain peaks. How impudent! Qin Wentian murmured in a low voice. Being monitored by so many people naturally wouldn't be a good thing. Chapter 483. Qin Wentian walked out of the cavern, his gaze fixed on the mountain range as he emotionlessly stated, "I Qin am right here. If anyone wants to seize the treasures, feel free to come." His voice rumbled, echoing throughout the entire mountain range. Although those people heard Qin Wentian's voice, they didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Their master only told them to keep an eye on Qin Wentian, but didn't give the order to act. Unless Qin Wentian wanted to leave their sight, only then would they act to stop him. However, Qin Wentian clearly had no intentions of leaving. From afar, a furry snow-white puppy flew over, leaping into Qin Wentian's embrace. This puppy was none other than Little Rascal, who had returned after sending Song Jiao away. Qin Wentian hugged Little Rascal in his arms as he stroked its head, after which he slowly walked out, heading towards the transaction peak. However, this time around he didn't head directly to the trading peak. Instead, he followed the mountain path, walking amidst the crowd, trying to see if he could find anything he wanted. Those who were keeping an eye on Qin Wentian were still around. Seeing Qin Wentian blending into the crowd, their eyes grew even tighter, as though they were worried that Qin Wentian would slip away. Little Rascal leapt out of Qin Wentian's embrace, and sprinted madly on the mountain path. After a short while, it arrived at a stall, and turned its head to look at Qin Wentian, as it let out a series of yaya sounds. Qin Wentian came over, and glanced at the blood-colored fruits on the stall. He then asked Little Rascal, "Do you want to eat some?" "Yeah." Little Rascal nodded. Qin Wentian laughed. "How do you want to trade these fruits?" "These are demonic spirit fruits. They can allow demonic beasts to mature faster. If you want all of them, I will only charge you 100 4th-layer yuan meteor stones." The stall owner smiled as he looked at Qin Wentian, before shifting his gaze to Little Rascal, silently speculating about the weight of Little Rascal in Qin Wentian's heart. 30. Qin Wentian said flatly, "Little friend, these demon spirit fruits are extremely precious, especially for people who have demon pets." The stall owner said very seriously, However, Qin Wentian had already turned around and walked away. Young friend, how about 80? Qin Wentian ignored it. The little fellow followed behind him, wagging its tail and looking a little pitiful, but Qin Wentian was indifferent. I'll bear the pain and give 50 renminbi to my young friend. The boss gritted his teeth and seemed to have made up his mind. Although he had lost a lot, Qin Wentian still didn't turn back. Little friend, you win, the stall owner said gloomily when he saw that Qin Wentian was about to leave. Qin Wentian turned around, only to see that little rascal's movements were even faster than his. In an instant, little rascal had already turned around and lunged towards the demon spirit fruits, devouring them all in one gulp. Upon seeing this scene, both Qin Wentian and the stall owner were stunned. After which, Qin Wentian took out some yuan meteor stones and passed them to the stall owner before carrying little rascal away. Seeing the intimate actions of the two, the stall owner couldn't help but curse in his heart. At this moment, he was sure that if he had called out the price of 80 RMB, the other party would definitely have turned back. However, Qin Wentian was also extremely gloomy. As they walked along the mountain path, little rascal actually didn't hold back at all. It wanted many things, and Qin Wentian could only follow behind it speechlessly as it paid the bill. Not even 2 hours had passed, and little rascal had already made him spend 400 yuan meteor stones. Even those who were monitoring Qin Wentian were speechless. This white-robed young man was actually so wealthy. Not only that, the amount of yuan meteor stones he spent was only on his demonic beast pet. Although the demonic beast pet looked extremely ordinary, the treasures it ate weren't shabby at all. Yet, Qin Wentian still managed to satisfy it completely. Wasn't this a little too extravagant? Qin Wentian was also sighing in his heart. This little rascal was so small in its original form, yet its appetite was so terrifying. And at this moment, little rascal started running again, causing Qin Wentian to roll his eyes. This time, little rascal came to a stall with spiritual herbs placed on display. The pure white herbs exuded a mystical aura, causing one's blood to flow freely. You want to eat it? Qin Wentian stared at little rascal as he asked. Little rascal shook its head, causing Qin Wentian to freeze. He then asked, Is that for me? Yeah. Little rascal unceasingly nodded its head. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he replied, At least you have some conscience. Little friend, this demonic beast pet of yours is truly mystical. It actually knows about the blood shadow herb. I'm sure little friend has the power of a bloodline, right? The owner of the stall smiled as he looked at Qin Wentian. This blood shadow herb exudes a blood-red glow. Take a closer look. Qin Wentian took a closer look, and indeed, he could see traces of blood-red light flickering on the pure white herb, causing one to click their tongues in wonder. Little friend, if you use your bloodline to battle, you would definitely exhaust the power of your bloodline. This herb is able to speed up the recovery of your bloodline, and it's extremely rare. I only managed to obtain 3 of these herbs by chance. The owner of the stall explained to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian glanced at little rascal. It seemed like this little fellow was truly powerful. To think that it actually had the ability to hunt for treasures. Qin Wentian didn't know that the reason why he was able to meet Mo Qingqing back then was because of little rascal's unique ability that attracted Mo Qingqing's attention. What is the price for this herb? Qin Wentian inquired. Little friend, do you have any divine weapons on you? The owner of the stall turned his gaze onto Qin Wentian as he asked. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He had quite a few divine weapons on him, and they were all plundered from the corpses of the experts who had fallen in his hands. Not only that, many of the divine weapons were extremely good. I need a high-grade 4th-ranked divine weapon. The eyes of the owner of the stall flickered. Although these 3 blood shadow herbs were extremely valuable, a high-grade, 4th-ranked divine weapon was even rarer. I don't have one mid-grade, 4th-ranked divine weapon. Qin Wentian shook his head. Even if he had one, he wouldn't admit it. The owner of the stall stared at Qin Wentian as he stated, I need 3 mid-grade, 4th-ranked blood shadow herbs, 1 for each stock. I only have 2. If you want them, I'll give them to you immediately. Qin Wentian waved his palms as a long spear and an arm guard appeared. A complete set of divine weapons, capable of both offense and defense. The owner of the stall exuded a sharp aura as he stared at Qin Wentian. This person's judgment was truly sharp. He actually knew that Qin Wentian needed a long spear. Fine. The owner of the stall was evidently moved as he agreed to the deal. Qin Wentian handed over the divine weapon, and with a wave of his hand, he kept the blood shadow herbs. Sir. At this moment, a voice drifted over. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over, only to see a young man and woman walking over. The young man's gaze was fixed on Qin Wentian's hand, while the young woman seemed to be in a weakened state. Can you give the blood shadow herbs to me? I'm willing to pay an equal price for them. The young man spoke to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian glanced at the young woman. The source of her weakness originated from her blood qi. Most probably, the blood shadow herbs would be able to help her recover. However, this item was extremely important to him as well. This was especially so after he activated his bloodline limit. My apologies, I have a use for this item. Qin Wentian replied as he turned and walked away. The young man's gaze faltered as he stated, Sir, I'm willing to pay an even higher price. There's no need. Qin Wentian emotionlessly replied. You. The young man's countenance stiffened as he stared at the back view of Qin Wentian. However, he only heard the young woman speaking in a low voice. Senior, forget it, it's not a big deal. I'll just recover slowly. Qin Wentian halted his steps as he turned around. With a wave of his hand, a blood shadow herb flew out and landed beside the young man and woman. Qin Wentian stated, a mid-grade 4th-ranked divine weapon. Right. The young man started, before nodding his head. With a wave of his hand, a divine weapon flew out towards Qin Wentian. Many thanks, sir. An equal exchange, there's no need to thank me. Qin Wentian kept the divine weapon as he turned and left. The young woman stared at Qin Wentian as she asked, What's your name? We're strangers who met by chance. There's no need to ask so much. Qin Wentian's silhouette vanished. The young woman stared at his back as she commented, This person is truly mysterious. I don't think he exchanged for a divine weapon. The young man shook his head. Junior sister, you're too kind. Quickly consume this blood shadow herb. MHM. The woman nodded her head lightly and swallowed the blood shadow Ganoderma, activating her bloodline power. The medicinal effects of the blood shadow Ganoderma permeated through her veins, causing her complexion to gradually turn rosy. The blood shadow Ganoderma was extremely beneficial to the recovery of bloodline power. That demonic beast is truly powerful. After the young woman's breathing stabilized, her eyes shone with a radiant light, as though she was a completely different person. She stared at the young man beside her as she asked, Senior brother, will we be discovered by others? It's only a matter of time. Shall we investigate again? The young man asked. At this moment, the young woman turned her gaze towards the horizon, only to see an expert flying over. Her beautiful eyes froze. Qin Wentian didn't lack divine weapons. The reason why he took out a stalk of blood shadow herb was very simple. That young woman's character wasn't bad. Qin Wentian could tell the cultivation base of others with a single glance. That young man and young woman might seem ordinary, but they were both extremely powerful, at the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper. Not only that, there was a surge of energy in the young woman's body. Given the temperament of many people, if he didn't agree to the exchange, they would definitely snatch the herb away by force. Because he found the young woman pleasing to the eye, Qin Wentian gave up a stalk of blood shadow herb. This was his temperament. He did whatever he wanted, disregarding the gains and losses. Little rascal, you should be full now, right? Qin Wentian pinched Little Rascal in his embrace. Little Rascal lay on Qin Wentian. Squeaking noises could be heard as its stomach flipped over, seemingly satisfied. Staring at Little Rascal's expression, Qin Wentian was speechless. His silhouette flickered as he flew towards the pavilion at the waist of the mountain. However, before he arrived, he already saw many people staring up in the air. Over there, several experts were flying through the air, landing at the location where the treasure exchange was held. Not only him, The people on the mountain path were all staring in that direction. There were even some who exclaimed in shock. That's Jin Yan, one of the most outstanding geniuses of the Golden Fire Aristocrat clan. His cultivation base is at the 5th level of Heavenly Dipper, and he's extremely powerful. Why is he here? Someone sighed. Jian Jingtian from the Heaven Shocking Sword sect has also arrived. Someone in the crowd stared at a young man with an ancient sword on his back. Not only that, the sounds of exclamations rose and fell unceasingly. At the same time, news from the location at the waist of the mountain gradually spread over. So it turned out that there was someone who discovered the entrance to a mysterious realm in the depths of the Heavenly Mountain range. Using this information, he came to the Treasure Exchange Conference to exchange for a large amount of Yuan meteor stones. Not only that, those who wanted him to lead the way had to pay the price he offered. For a period of time, this caused quite a commotion, attracting the experts from the various major sects and clans to rush over. The Heavenly Mountain range was incomparably mysterious, spanning over 10,000 miles. There were many secret realms hidden within, and it was difficult to see the true appearance of them. Mysterious realms referred to newly discovered secret realms. Every time a mysterious realm appeared, it would cause quite a commotion. Usually speaking, there would always be treasures appearing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.